everyone. We will be starting in 1 minute. Studio. I know, it's a start. As we're getting ready to start, just a quick mic check for the school board members who are participating virtually. Ms. Keys-Gamarra?
I'm here.
Ms. Tolan?
I'm here, thank you.
Ms. Darana Koufax?
Good evening, I'm here.
Mr. Anabudo?
I'm here. Thank
Wonderful.
you.
Thank you. And we have 9 members in person. Okay, the March 4, 2021 regular meeting of the Fairfax County School Board will now come to order. I will now take roll. Ms. Cohen?
Here.
Ms. Corbett-Sanders?
Good evening, everybody.
Mr. Frisch?
Here.
Ms. McLaughlin?
Here.
Ms. Marin?
Here.
Ms. Somesh?
Here.
Ms. Pekarsky?
Here.
Ms. Sizemore-Heiser?
I'm here.
Thank you. And I've already taken the attendance of board members participating virtually. Please rise as our student representative, Nathan Anabudo, leads us in reciting the Pledge of Allegiance, followed by a moment of silence.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you.
Please be seated. In order to comply with Section 2.2-3712D of the Code of Virginia, it is necessary for the board to certify that since the Fairfax County School Board convened a closed meeting on March 4, 2021, and to the best of each member's knowledge, only public business matters lawfully exempted from open meeting requirements and only such public business matters as were identified in the motion convening the closed meeting were heard, discussed, or considered by the board during the closed meeting. Thank you, Ms. Corbett-Sanders, seconded by Ms. Cohen. All in favor? Ms. Somesh, Ms. Corbett-Sanders, Mr. Frisch, Ms. Sizemore-Heiser, Ms. Cohen, Ms. Pekarsky, Ms. Marin, Ms. McLaughlin, Ms. Darana Koufax, Ms. Tolan, Ms. Keys-Gamarra, and myself. That is unanimous. If you would like to review a copy of the agenda or any agenda item that is being discussed tonight, that information may be found at the back of the auditorium. Tonight's meeting is being broadcast on Channel 99 and live streamed on the website at fcps.edu/tv/ch99. Item 50.3, Stonecroft Transportation Center Boundary Confirmation Agreement with Fairfax County Water Authority, was moved from the consent agenda at the request of a board member. I now call on Mr. Anabudo for a few announcements.
Thank you, Dr. Henderson. March 2021 marks Theater in Our Schools Month. The American Alliance for Theater and Education has designated March as Theater in Our Schools Month to celebrate and increase public awareness of the benefits of theater education for youth development. The theme is, quote, the impact of theater in education, end quote. Theater education has the power to raise academic achievement and to stimulate innovation and creativity among students. The Alliance encourages students to celebrate the positive impact of theater and to remember that all students should have access to quality theater education in their lives. Additionally, March also marks Music in Our Schools Month. March has been officially designated by the National Association for Music Education as Music in Our Schools Month. This year's theme is music, the sound of my heart. The impact of music education on the lives of students during this particular school year, unlike any other, is evident in how the social emotional benefits have carried them through the pandemic and brought joy in their communities. Thank you. Dr. Anderson?
Thank you, Mr. Anabudo. We are now at agenda item 2.05, BSBA Equity in Education Resolution. I call on Ms. Omesh for the resolution.
Whereas we as a county have verbalized the words and promise to establish a One Fairfax as an aspiration and understand the long path ahead to actualize this imperative. Whereas we must first acknowledge the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territory of the Manahoac people on which we are learning, working, and gathering today. We also must acknowledge the history of genocide, slavery, and exclusion in this area and throughout the United States that leaves us with a legacy that persists today as we continue to work towards justice, equity, liberation, and decolonization of our minds here in Fairfax County. And whereas we remember that at the very founding of the concept of America, that the founders had forged as immigrants seeking asylum from persecution in their own homelands, a commitment that was made to prevent a tyranny of the majority. And whereas we recognize that factors including but not limited to race, ethnicity, socioeconomic status, religion, differing ability, gender identity, sexual orientation, documentation, language, and the varying ways in which these factors intersect have a demonstrated and deep history of impacting the quality of educational opportunities provided to a student. And whereas we know that this history includes an active and deliberate attempt to undermine equity in education, specifically to resist civil rights attempts to correct the wrongs of this legacy. From the very aftermath of the Supreme Court case, Brown versus Board of Education, where our own Fairfax County public school leaders stood on the wrong side, and where today we affirm our commitment otherwise. And whereas we know that at the root of these inequities is dehumanization of the other, and the resulting maldistribution of power that's not always available to everyone, and that lives in a context where decisions were made to establish legal and structural obstacles and barriers to preserve the interests of the majority, or of those most powerful, those with the loudest voices. Power that we hold today and carry moral burdens and obligations to honor. And whereas as school board members, we recognize that the work of equity starts with ourselves, and that it requires deep and deliberate introspection, empathy, and self-improvement, and that we must sensitize ourselves to differences, to explore our own privileges and biases, and find the humanity in each other in order to become more worthy and effective public servants. And whereas we hear and see our students and understand that despite past efforts, their experiences in our schools are not all the same, we are prepared to rectify and have no tolerance for any and all experiences that lead a child to feel anything less than supported, proud, and loved in our system. Whereas we acknowledge the courage required to tackle these disparities and to continue in resource and opportunity gaps that have become all too predictable. It is not lost on us that we have achievement gaps that have barely narrowed in over 10 years, as well as boundary challenges in programming that are shaped by the legacies of our unjust past. We understand that our children learn a curriculum that they may not all relate to or feel motivated by, and we know that experiences of difference exist from and among both students and adults. Whereas we must interrogate our system in all its dimensions, seeking equity for staff as well. We must examine our policies and practices vertically and horizontally, above and below the surface. Whereas the COVID-19 pandemic and corresponding economic crisis have exacerbated and compounded the inequities already experienced by too many in our community, exposing what has and always should have been urgent. It is more important now more than ever that we as advocates and servants of public education are addressing these inequities head-on rather than with platitudes or half-measure. Whereas we can no longer be naive to the fact that to some, establishing equity can feel like injustice when it has persisted for so long. And as we continue our work, we must strive to face our challenges confidently and seek to advance the interests of all, even even at and especially when they are at a cost to ourselves. Whereas it is important for Fairfax families, students, teachers, school staff, and administrators to encourage and center robust and ongoing discussion, reflection, and confrontation of the inequities present within their school communities, whereas we see our challenges as opportunities and we look to our potential. We are Fairfax County Public Schools. We call upon all to tap into our deeper humanity and to fearlessly imagine how far we can go when we face our fears and advance together. Now, therefore, be it resolved that Fairfax County Public Schools recognizes the month of March 2021 as the VSBA Equity in Education Month, with the intention that the system-wide work of equity starts right here with our very selves.
Thank you, Ms. Omesh. Is there a second? Ms. Marin.
Yes, I second.
Ms. Omesh, would you like to speak to your resolution?
I believe it speaks for itself. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Marin.
Yes, thank you, Ms. Omesh, for the very robust reading there and sharing your thoughts. You know, as I reflected on equity, I really thought about three things. One is how our school board promotes equity, how as individual members we promote equity, and how as an individual we can seek to continually learn. And when I looked at this past year, the policies that the board has promoted include starting work now on our anti-racist, anti-bias policy, removing Confederate names from our schools that are symbols of Jim Crow era oppression that were a tarnish to us all and insulting in particular to Black Americans, working on how we hire staff to include retaining people of color and different abilities in our classrooms and in our curriculum, particularly to expose the colonialistic roots of the Commonwealth and the nation and how that is impacted every day in our lives. As individual members, I just wanted to share the state is reviewing our social studies standards, and I poured over the content to really make sure that the Governor's Commission on African American Education, that those recommendations do go through. That's part of what we can do as members. And as an individual seeking to learn, I'm just finishing up my first Langston Hughes novel, Not Without Laughter, and I want to keep learning to understand what other communities are going through, and I think that that work by our school board is going to continue to raise the equity work that the division is doing. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other speakers to this resolution? Ms. Keys-Gamarra.
Thank you, and I am pleased to support this motion. And I thank Ms. Omesh for giving us such a robust description of the work ahead of us. I believe and like to believe that I've worked for equity, but I think the hardest work that we can do will really begin with fresh eyes that we take as a board. I recently had the opportunity to watch the documentary Amend, the Fight for America, as one of the producers came and spoke to our justice students. And there was a quote in there, which I had heard before, but I heard it with fresh ears. And one of our civil rights leaders said, the word wait almost always means never. And so as we as a board try to really do this work, I hope that we will remember that that has been the perspective for marginalized communities. And I hope that we will not shy away from hard conversations, because I think that we can lead by example and hopefully really cause the hard work to be exemplified by us, because we are encouraging everyone in Fairfax County in the FCPS to do the hard work as well. I am encouraged that I have colleagues that are willing to take on this work, and I pray that we lock arms and we never turn back to the status quo. Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing that there are no other speakers to this resolution, I will now call for the vote. All in favor? Mr. Frisch, Ms. Omesh, Ms. Corbett-Sanders, Ms. Sizemore-Heiser, Ms. Cohen, Ms. Pekarsky, Ms. Marin, Ms. McLaughlin, Ms. Keys-Gamarra, Ms. Tolan, Ms. Derenak Koufax, and myself. That is unanimous. Item 2.06, Public Schools Week Resolution. I call on Ms. Pekarsky.
Whereas public schools educate 9 of every 10 students, the great equalizer for children, they have lifted generations of people out of poverty and from middle to higher income, helping to set young adults on the path to a fulfilling life. And whereas public schools honors the 50.8 million students, 3.2 million teachers, and hundreds of thousands of specialists, administrators, and support staff working in public schools today. And whereas public schools look different this year, but the commitment is the same. Keep students safe, learning, and growing, one student at a time. Public school leaders are working for the best interests of all of our students and to ensure public schools can emerge stronger from this global crisis than ever before. And whereas the COVID-19 pandemic has highlighted the importance of public schools, strong and inclusive public education systems are essential to the short and long-term recovery of society. And whereas public schools are the place not only where students get to learn and progress, fulfill their hopes and dreams, but also where they learn to live in community. Now, therefore, be it resolved that Fairfax County Public Schools recognizes Public Schools Week to celebrate some of the exemplary work of our nation's educators, particularly in these extraordinary times and circumstances, and show the strength and potential of our nation's public schools and to our students' futures. I so move.
Is there a second? Thank you, Ms. Cohen. Ms. Pekarsky, would you like to speak to your resolution?
Thank you, Dr. Anderson. I'd just like to say that it has indeed been a difficult year for public schools with circumstances unlike any we have ever seen. But I am encouraged that, as this resolution said, we will come back better, stronger. And the stories I have heard from educators, from having to call students to help them with alarm setting, to help them get lunches, to make sure that they stay on track. It really gives me a lot of hope, especially as we look to next year. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Pekarsky. Ms. Cohen, would you like to speak to your second?
I would. I think, in this year, certainly more than ever, we're realizing that our public schools are not just responsible for teaching our kids. Mm-hmm. We've come to understand and appreciate, I think, more than ever, that our public schools have become a place where many of our kids, it's potentially the only food that they have for the day. And it's a place where they know that people care about their health, and both physical and mental. And so, certainly, I think none of us would be here if we didn't believe in the value of public schools. But I think we've all had our beliefs about what schools really are tested in this year for sure. Thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Cohen. Any other board members wishing to speak? Ms. McLaughlin?
In addition to our hardworking staff who put in time every single day, from the front lines in the classrooms up to our superintendent and his team, I do want to also give a very special shout out to all of our parents and their family members who all support their children every single day, and certainly during the pandemic have done so much to help us during a historic moment we never thought we'd ever see. And I also want to say a special appreciation to living here in Fairfax County. I've been here 25 years now, and when my husband's family moved here in 1971 from New York, they came because Fairfax County was known to be a community that valued public schools. It was a shining beacon of strong public education then, and we all humbly sit here on the board now trying to continue that legacy of great public education for every student. And so I know our task at hand has been tremendously challenging for everyone during the pandemic, but I do hope that the public knows how much we appreciate every single person who lives in this county and everything you do to make this school system meet the needs of children every single day. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Marin?
Yes, I am really thrilled to stop and pause to acknowledge our public schools. I didn't go to a private school until I was 22, and I'm really just, I can't remark enough about how important our public education is. But here's the thing, we need to decide as a public how we will continue to steward and foster our public schools. Yes, our schools can be better. People can do their jobs better. But as a recovering perfectionist, it takes a lot to acknowledge that nothing is perfect. But here's the thing, these are our public schools. That means that each one of us, each one of you, have the ability and really the obligation to ask yourself how you can make it better, how we can not tear down our schools and ask for what's not possible in this extremely unreal situation of COVID, but can we adjust our expectations to what is possible now in the largest school system in the metropolitan area that we're in that has great advantages but also some disadvantages, will really go a long way in sustaining our public will to keep our public schools going. We're in a budget season where, once again, we are asking for funding, and it doesn't look like we will get the budget fully funded. The mantra is that our county board of supervisors, they do what they can to increase funding, but we consistently are not funded. So when we advocate, when I hear the public advocating, please know that we hear you, but we have limited resources from the public body. So I'm really amazed at the work that happens in our schools in this time. I hope we can meet every child's needs. Every staff member's professionality should be met and honored. And I think that we really need to, as a community, be proud and be glad to advocate for our public schools and fight for what's needed, but do it with respect and appreciation for this system that we have. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Corbett-Sanders.
Yes, thank you, Chair Anderson. I am struck by the sequencing of this resolution tonight. What's so important to understand is that this follows the resolution on equity, and it actually is an appropriate sequencing for tonight's agenda because our schools are at the center of the equity discussion. And COVID has been difficult. It's been difficult for our students, for our families, and for our staff. But we see a light at the end of the tunnel. I think that I share with my colleagues the wish and the expectation that by the fall, we will be back in our buildings 5 days a week. But to do that, we also know that there is work to be done to start addressing the inequities that we have seen rear their head as a result of COVID-19. We know that our children come to us from very diverse backgrounds. We know that our children during the course of the COVID-19 have suffered from housing insecurity, food insecurity, and also the different impacts on their social emotional health of this pandemic. It has been traumatic. And so I know that now more than ever, we need to understand and support the importance of our public schools as a centerpiece in our community, because the fight before us for our children will be to address those opportunity gaps, those learning losses, and the challenges in the social emotional area that each of these kids have faced given COVID-19, something that none of us expected. So I am pleased and thankful, appreciative to you, Dr. Anderson, as you structured the agenda to talk about equity first and then talk about the importance of public schools.
Thank you, Ms. Corbett-Sanders. Are there any other speakers to this resolution? Seeing none, I will now call for the vote. All those in favor? Mr. Frisch, Ms. Omeish, Ms. Corbett-Sanders, Ms. Sizemore-Heiser, Ms. Cohen, Ms. Pekarsky, Ms. Marin, Ms. McLaughlin, Ms. Derenak Colfax, Ms. Keys-Gamarra, Ms. Tolan, and myself. That is unanimous. The next order of business is citizen participation. Speakers are requested to limit their remarks to not more than 3 minutes. The school board will not hear statements involving issues that have been scheduled for public hearings, such as capital improvement program, budget, and boundaries. Speakers should only address new business action items or resolutions as listed on the meeting agenda. Complaints regarding individual students or school-based employees should be directed to the appropriate school principal or other school official. Speakers should refrain from using personally identifiable information in connection with an individual student and are expected to deliver their comments with the decorum and respect appropriate to the conduct of the public's business. In-person speakers should wear a mask, stand behind the black line on the floor, and speak into the microphone. Thank you for your cooperation, and thanks to those who have come to speak with us today. Tonight, we have 10 citizens who signed up to address the board, and we will also have 5 video testimonies. I will now turn it over to our clerk to call the speakers.
Our first speaker is Spencer Hudson.
Do I just start or? All right. I'm a senior in the Fairfax County Public School System. I went back to school Tuesday for the first time in 355 days. In my first 2 classes, I sat in a library with a classroom monitor where there were only 2 kids in my first class and 3 in my second. Both my AP government teacher and my German 5 teacher are still working from home. Advanced classes are very hard to do online, and virtual school doesn't work for me and it doesn't work for most students. Sadly, when we were given the opportunity to return in person, many of my peers chose to stay virtual when they found out that many of our teachers wouldn't be coming back to school. This is what some of them said about that. I don't want to have to bother to get dressed. It's easier to just wear my pajamas all day. If I go in person, they won't let me use my phone during class, and I've gotten used to just being able to chat with whoever all day. It's only 2 days. What's the point? A bunch of my teachers aren't even going to be there. I was going to go, but then I got like 3 notices about my teachers who weren't even going to be there. If they're not going to be there, why should I be there? I wanted to go, but my parents said that me, my brother, and my mom were going to go live with our family in Texas next year because chances are we won't even have regular school in the fall. If I'm never going to see these people again, what's the point of me going now? I really wanted to go back, but our coach basically sort of said that the team members shouldn't because if you're in a class with somebody who gets COVID, they'll make you quarantine, and that could jeopardize our entire season. At home, I can eat whenever I want, and I don't have to fill out a COVID form or something just to go to the bathroom. I don't really need to go. I'm passing my classes. My grades aren't fantastic, but I realized I don't need my grades to be fantastic. I just need to pass. I heard you aren't allowed to talk to people at lunch, which seems stupid. People talk at restaurants. I begged my mom not to make me go back because it's all just a big hassle. It's nothing like real in-person school. And she was kind of like, whatever. This past year has been a complete waste of my life. I haven't learned anything. I've cheated on every assignment and every test. There's nothing for me to look forward to. Nobody I know has gotten sick enough to keep all the schools closed or tell us that we can't go to school. This all seems like a simulation. For our whole lives, we've been told that our education is important and that our education is valued. But right now, it seems like that was a lie, and it seems like a lot of FCPS just doesn't care. Why not? Earlier in this meeting, you said that the word wait often means never. When you tell us to wait and you tell us that we'll be back in school in the fall, do you mean never? We expect more from you. When a high school senior is here talking to you, things have gone badly. We expect that you step up your game and we expect that you do your job.
Our next speaker is Charlotte Ella Henderson.
Good evening. My name is Perry Henderson. I'm a parent of 3 kids in FCPS. My daughters and I want to talk to you about the Public Schools Week agenda item. Our family trusted our public schools to educate our kids. For the last year, FCPS has failed. We have watched countless other school districts and private schools figure out how to put students first during this pandemic. Meanwhile, FCPS students have been suffering in a model that you call distance learning. The students most at risk and most vulnerable are suffering the most. Ironically, this is the exact opposite of the equity this school board claims to be working towards. When are we going to have a normal 5-day school week for students who need it? Returning to full-time in-person learning should be the #1 priority at every school board meeting until it is a reality. Getting kids back to school full-time is the most urgent need for this school system. Here are my daughters to give you their perspective on our public schools.
My name is Ella Henderson, and I go to Waples Mills Elementary School. I'm in 5th grade, and I'm a triplet. My triplet brother, Nolan, has special needs. Since we've been doing school on a computer, my mom or a helper has to help him all day with virtual school. Using a computer is really hard for Nolan. Nolan finally went back to school about a week ago for 4 days. It almost feels like a normal school week for him. My class is supposed to go back on March 16th. I'm super excited, except it's only for 2 days a week. How's that supposed to make a difference? We still have to stare at our computer screens for other days. We will only get to see each other for 2 days. It's March and school will be over in June. We looked at our calendar and we will only go to school in person for 24 days this whole school year. This has to change. Please get us in school more than 2 days a week.
My name is Charlotte Henderson, and I am a 5th grader at Waples Mill. I have not been happy with the choices you have made for the last year keeping our schools closed. I love going to school. I can't stand school on the computer, though. Staring at a screen gives me a headache. I don't even want to get out of bed on school days anymore. I really like my teacher, but it's hard to learn on a computer. I couldn't wait till 5th grade to do cool science experiments in school. Instead, we watch videos of other people doing those experiments. Being on computers for school has so many distractions like YouTube, emails, and games. Most of my classmates don't even turn on their camera anymore, so nobody sees each other. Why can't FCPS let us go to school more than 2 days than other schools do? It's not fair that our cousins in New York have been going in person to their public schools 5 days a week since September. My friends here have been going to their Catholic school in person this whole school year. Kids in FCPS deserve to get back in school more than 2 days a week. School on the computer does not work, and we are falling behind.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Katherine Faire.
Hello, my name is Katherine Faire. Thank you all for having me. I am a senior at West Springfield High School, and I moved here 5 months before school shut down. I'm only 17, so my expertise is limited. If you need me to write an FRQ or recite the periodic table in order, I'm your girl. But I have no degree or held down a job. I'm no professional. But if a minor can find the flaws in a system, I'm sure you professionals can engineer a solution. While we are all reeling from COVID and there is no option other than being online, PowerPoint can be a great tool to transfer from in-person curriculum to an online teaching. I think that it's a great teaching method. It can have color, images, transitions, but when every single teacher, every day for 7 hours straight only uses PowerPoint, students tend to get very tired of colorful slides with so much Arial 11-point font that our eyes go crossed. Now, I don't want to seem like a PowerPoint hater, but I present to you the PowerPoint rule, 10, 20, 30. 10 slides, 20 minutes, 30-point font minimum. This rule is utilized in the workplace, especially in business. As high school is preparing us for the workplace, why not standardize the practice? Professionals have already engineered the solution to this issue. We just need to enact it. My main concern goes out to all of my active duty military brat brethren. We move, or PCS, a lot. I have 13 times. Military friendships tend to move fast. Since I'll only be here for a year, we may as well enjoy it while it lasts. Military brats in the first month of school are equivalent to toddlers in the playground. Hi, I've known you for 30 minutes. You're my new best friend. At least, that's how it worked in person. My online schooling tends to follow this trend. I click the Join Class button. I take notes the teacher gives during their hour-long lecture with no breaks. I ask a question in the chat. I closed the tab. Did you see what was missing? Human interaction. I have no idea who is in any of my classes. If you're active in class, I might recognize your profile picture. If not, I have no idea that you exist. The only person who knows my name in any of my classes are my teachers. The only friend I have on this continent I made in person last year, and she's another military kid, and her only friend is me. Now, there's no solution from the workplace that I can suggest to solve the military kids have no way to make friends issue, or Google would have given it to me months ago. But I think that that's where you come in. You are all the experts. So please, engineer a solution for your lonely, quarantined Army brat.
Our next speaker is Joanne Neural.
Good evening. I'm the father of 2 FCPS students, and I would like to speak on the topic of equity in education. FCPS and this board have created a gross equity gap between the students who attend private schools and those who attend FCPS. Private schools have opened safely for in-person learning 5 days a week, while FCPS is only just now starting to open part-time. The damage to our students is real. Let me tell you about my daughter. She is 5 years old and in kindergarten. She has not learned what she would have in a classroom. How could she? She can't focus on a screen all day. But what really disturbs me is the change to her disposition. Normally, she is a happy and energetic child, but now she has episodes of apathy and sluggishness. She complains that she doesn't have friends. Her amazing teacher does everything that she can in impossible circumstances, but my daughter needs to be in a classroom. For children, socialization is not a nice to have. It is a requirement for healthy growth and development. When my daughter got to start in-person school last week, it was a boon. She asks every day whether she gets to go back. And on the 2 days that I get to say yes, she glows with excitement. But on the other days, it breaks my heart to see the quiet resignation on her face. It does not have to be this way. In so many schools, it is not this way. This is not equity. In another blow to equity, distance learning is even harder for the students with special needs. Let me tell you about my son, a 3rd grader with ADHD. With the services he used to receive under his 504 plan, he was thriving before schools closed. He is not thriving now. It's not his teacher's fault. He too has an amazing teacher, but she cannot see when he gets distracted and wanders off, or when he gets frustrated and overwhelmed and ends up screaming on the floor. Now, my son needs psychiatric medication to make it through even 1 day of distance learning. My children need to be in school with their teachers. To address inequity, loss of learning, and damage to their well-being, all students deserve the opportunity to be in a classroom with a teacher 5 days a week. We know how to get there. Other schools have given us a blueprint. You can no longer ask children for understanding because you didn't get a budget. You can no longer ask them for grace and resilience while you figure it out. Open schools now.
Our next speaker is Deborah Mallis.
Thank you for letting me speak today. I'm here to support the Equity in Education resolution, which celebrates the role of equity in education, and how, in my experience, then equity is deepening as schools remain virtual and hybrid. I am Deborah Mallis. I'm a product of FCPS. I went to Hollow Meadows Elementary School, Carl Sandburg Middle, and West Potomac High School. I am now a parent of 3 FCPS students, and I teach and one of the community's most vulnerable high schools, Annandale High School. I'm a special educator. Though I am a proud member of the Teachers Union, Fairfax County Federation of Teachers, I felt strongly to speak for the students today. I'm here to speak from my heart for students in FCPS who do not have a voice. I am here to convey the concerns I hear from parents who are not fluent in English and who do not know how to navigate the system. I am here to say, where I go, as a teacher and a parent, I see students in trouble. I see things that have to change. I have some students in my classes that are doing really well, but some of my students are not. Some students do not show up, period. Others show up to class daily and disengage. They ghost out of my classes. This means they're logged on, but they do not respond to a word I say or complete work. I have a student who I will call John, who I had as a freshman, and I helped him a lot. I have him again now as a senior, and he was doing well. He showed up to class, he participated, and he did his work. He had a C the second quarter. However, I noticed he stopped coming to class virtually. I tried to call, but none of the numbers worked, including his cell. Yesterday, I found out from the counselor that he is unenrolled in school. He dropped out the spring semester of his senior year, and we have no effective way to contact him. Sadly, this is not the only one. I do not know if this would have happened in person, but I know the numbers of students dropping out has increased because of the cracks the students are falling through, and those cracks quickly turn into canyons. The rates of students not graduating are higher. I truly believe that in these cases, teachers would have had a significantly better chance of addressing early if we were in person. In conclusion, I truly believe we should go to school in person 5 days a week. The students I see and don't see at Annandale don't have the resources to thrive. It is hard to say, given the chaos of the pandemic and the lack of data, how much damage we are currently doing by not having students back in the building.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Isabella Vida.
Hello, my name is Isabella and I'm a sophomore of FCPS. Today I would like to talk about the arts, specifically theater, since that's what I do. For me and my peers, theater is a way to express ourselves and to escape. It's our outlet for happiness. And obviously a year ago, that all came to a halt. When I speak about everything, my first concern is safety. But as it's been proven time and time again, there are people at college level, high school, elementary, all over the country and the world that have proven that there are ways to safely broadcast theater and participate in it. And with many activities like sports or clubs and groups, you can outsource and you can go and do recreational things. But with theater, right now, school is our only avenue. And right now, I'm so thankful for the opportunities that we're starting to get, but we can't even be in a room for more than 30 minutes as singing without having to leave. Just in this beginning part, seeing sports come back up and games starting up, I've seen the light and joy in my friends' eyes that I haven't seen in over a year. I'd also like to talk about the Academy since I'm a part of that as well. The Academy is meant to prepare us for college and our futures. And with the structure we're working at right now, 2 days in school, that means only 1 day a week being in Academy, we are not able to properly get educated. I know people that have sacrificed classes at their base schools and that took courses over the summer like I did just so that we could get into the Academy. And though the Academy has tried to adapt to everything that's going on, it's impossible to prepare us for our futures. Colleges right now for the class of 20 and 21 are being lenient, as not having to accept SAT scores and different things like that. But as the years tick on, for my class and classes behind me, it is going to get progressively less lenient. So when they look at our resumes and see that we've done one thing in the past year and a half, it's really going to hurt our futures. So I plead with you, as you continue to make decisions, please consider the arts. We are a huge demographic in your student base, and your decisions are heavily affecting our futures, whether we get into colleges or not, and whether we get to do what we want to do and we need to do for some of us. So please realize the weight of your decisions, and please advocate for 5 days in school. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Michael Martin.
Good evening. My name's Dr. Michael Martin. I'm a pediatrician in Tyson's Corner. I also serve as the president of the Virginia chapter of the American Academy of Pediatrics. Schools are vital in children's educational, social, physical, and emotional development, as well as being a source of special services and nutrition. Without full-time in-person access to the support systems schools provide, disparities among students who are Black, Hispanic, American Indian, and living in poverty in Fairfax County will continue to widen. In the background of 95 and 98% of surveyed pediatricians in our state reporting increases in anxiety and depression, respectively, we also know that inequity exists in social supports for these same students suffering these tragic mental health outcomes that are rapidly rising. Children cannot survive on 7-hour Zoom sessions for months at a time, missing the in-person connections with peers and teachers. And I can share with you today was a typical day for me. I put one new patient on Prozac and I put one new patient on Concerta, and that's pretty much every day for the last several weeks. Both the national and Virginia chapter of the American Academy of Pediatrics strongly advocate that all policy considerations for school COVID-19 plans start with the goal of having students physically present in school full-time. Success for school reopening relies not on a single action, but the layering of mitigation steps that includes masking, hand washing, and physical distancing to the extent possible. Data shows low COVID-19 spread in schools when simple mitigation is done consistently, and that schools can be successful in opening during all levels of community transmission. The AAP states schools should weigh the benefits of strict adherence to a 6-foot spacing rule between students with potential downside if remote learning is the only alternative. We recommend that schools focus on keeping distance to the extent possible, especially between adults and during times without masking. 3 feet is widely used in educational settings with success in the US, including in Virginia, and around the world in all levels of community spread. Schools should not stay closed or hybrid because they cannot implement strict 6 feet distancing between students when ample evidence supports the use of 3 feet. Schools should strive to achieve the greatest extent possible. Children absolutely need to return to in-school learning for their healthy development and well-being. We know the absence of in-person school has widened health and educational inequity, as many children are suffering without the support of in-person classroom experiences. I and the Virginia AAP chapter urge a safe reopening of schools based on science and to avoid needless harm to the children in an unequal way. Returning to full-time in-person learning is the best prescription to narrow the inequity gap for our children during a pandemic that has no clear end in sight. It is clear that schools can open safely and
speaker's time is now
only
up.
continue to cause harm.
Our next speaker is Eric Hooks.
My family manages the needs of 3 young children, including a newborn, and 2 careers. My kindergartner has struggled to learn to read and write virtually, but this should not be a surprise to you since you've lowered grading standards and delayed learning assessments for all students to try to hide these problems. She gets very lonely when working at home during virtual and asynchronous days because they do not provide adequate social interaction with her peers. And in this, unfortunately, she is not alone. She needs to be in school in person with her teachers 5 days per week in order to avoid more lost learning. This is obvious to anyone who cares to really think about it, and it can't wait until you get around to it. so please stop kicking the can down the road. SRS students in Fairfax County have been in our schools 5 days per week all school year, and children of FCPS employees can now return to school 4 days per week, but my kindergartner only gets to go to school 2 days per week because equity. Outdoor and indoor high school sports have resumed with limited audiences, but my daughter's elementary school playground is still closed. This is not normal. This is not logically consistent, and this is no longer backed by any science. Your evidence-free reopening policies are arbitrary and somewhat punitive on students who choose to return to school. When the opportunity to close schools presented itself, Fairfax County did so without hesitation, leaving students and families out in the cold to just figure it out. But now, the time has come to fully reopen schools, except there's always another excuse not to. Millions of students, thousands of teachers, and hundreds of school systems have proven that 5-day in-person education is feasible, safe, and effective right now. This was even true during the height of the pandemic in January. We are all too aware that you're aligned with narrow interest groups that have lobbied for virtual teaching. Your continued indulgence of their influence at the expense of students and families in Fairfax County sets a clear and indefensible precedent for this school system. Your mismanagement of the pandemic will not be forgotten. You've caused irreparable harm to children, families, your own reputations, and the credibility of the public school system writ large. Do better, FCPS.
Our next speaker is Kim Cody.
Hello, my name is Kimberly Cody. I'm a veteran, a military spouse, and a proud mom to 2 military children. This year's National School Board Association's poster for National Public Schools Week really spoke to me as its words read, making connections. See, we are a military family who PCS'd or moved for our civilian friends this past summer during the pandemic. So while most people were not leaving their homes, we were asked to move from ours to another state. This move was the 6th move for our 3rd grader who is currently virtually attending his 4th elementary school, and the 4th move for our kindergartner. Making connections is what military children count on when they move from place to place. Making new connections, new friends, and finding a place within their new community, schools, sporting teams, upon arrival at a new location is what makes them resilient, amazing, brave, and willing to pack up their suitcases and bedrooms and move every time Uncle Sam asks them to. Unfortunately, our arrival to FCPS was anything but making connections. Children who were asked to move across the country and the world, all while their unvaccinated parents worked in person every day, or whose parents were deployed overseas, were also told it was too dangerous for them to go to school in person. But Mom, my children cried, how will I make friends? How will I get to know anyone? This is not how it's supposed to be. All I could respond with was, I'm sorry. While inside, I felt like I failed my children, as their previous school is going to school in person 5 days a week since August. Should we have split my family, I wondered? It has been a year now since my 3rd grader has stepped foot inside of a classroom. He never got the opportunity to say goodbye to his connections in his previous state where we lived for only 11 months. But often I find him looking at a yearbook from that school with tears in his eyes, longing for those connections again. So what is FCPS's plan for making connections for students like my children? What is your plan to return our children to 5 days a week in the classroom? You see, military families usually only have a year or 2 at a location, and we always have a plan and multiple courses of action. And there's almost 13,000 military children within FCPS. Many of these children PCS during a pandemic and or will PCS this summer. Who will help those who have not made a single connection this year? What will happen to those military children when they PCS to a place that has had 5 days a week of in-person learning since August? Will these children be asked to repeat a grade? Will they be placed in remedial classes? How will our public schools make up for the learning loss? Many of our military family friends who are planning to separating from Fairfax County Public Schools if there's no plan for 5 days a week learning next fall. Now we are at our 12th month of extremely painful virtual learning, and we're just starting hybrid learning. I need a plan, we need a plan, our children need a plan. So I can do the best for my children. In-person learning 5 days a week is what's best for my children. I hope you always remember military children by following the Military Interstate Children's Compact Commission, or MIC3, encouraging all of our FCPS schools to become Purple Star schools, and support our highly transient military families, and not just when we turn in our impact aid forms. Thank you.
Our final speaker is Zia Tompkins. Zia Tompkins. I guess we'll move to the videos. We have videos from Kristen McBayer, Guadalupe Williamson, Maria Izzy, Christy Hudson, and Lisa Turkeltaub.
Hello, I'm Reverend Kristen McBrayer.
And I'm Minister Robert Faison. We serve at Emmaus United Church of Christ in Vienna.
As a mother of 3 in FCPS, it breaks my heart that their peers are forced to choose between attending worship on their high holidays and going to school. I can't imagine what it would be like if Easter were on a school day.
As the minister of faith formation, we teach our children and youth deep respect for our siblings in faith. Honoring major Jewish, Muslim, and Hindu holidays creates a wider welcome to the diversity of our students.
We believe there's a way to ensure that students have enough number of school days for them to have success academically, while also providing days off on these 4 important holidays: Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, Eid, and Diwali. It is a matter of respect. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Becca Messman. I am one of the pastors at Trinity Presbyterian Church in Herndon, Virginia. And I want to speak up so that staff and students in Fairfax County Public Schools are able to fully practice their faith, especially their high holy days, that they wouldn't have to choose between their work and study obligations and the expression of their faith. We have seen incredible resilience in the school system and in our staff and students, and a lot of that has to do with being part of faith communities. It is my hope that we can continue not just to excuse students and staff on their holy days, but to be able to celebrate what a tremendous gift and source of strength and connection that is for the entire community. I hope that their religious holidays, as well as my own as a Christian, are honored.
Me llamo Guadalupe y tengo un hijo en tercer grado en el condado de Fairfax en una escuela de título 1. Sabiendo que ustedes van a hablar sobre el tema de equidad, quisimos comentarles que pues desde que las escuelas están cerradas, mi hijo no ha recibido la educación que se merece. Él, por sus necesidades especiales, necesita estar en una escuela presencial, necesita de materiales manipulativos. Él recibe terapias de lenguaje, ocupacionales, trabaja con sus maestras de educación especial, pero él necesita hacer todo esto en persona para realmente poder aprender. Así que ha creado una desventaja impresionante, y no solo es una desventaja académica, sino también es una desventaja emocional. Ha sido muy difícil para él no estar presente con sus amigos, socializando con sus maestras, y ver además que su hermano, que está en segundo grado en una escuela parroquial, sí está yendo a la escuela todos los días de lunes a viernes desde hace 6 meses. Mi hijo me pregunta: mamá, ¿por qué mi hermano sí va a la escuela? Su escuela está abierta, ¿por qué mi escuela no está abierta? Y realmente pues no tenemos la respuesta, porque las escuelas no son focos de transmisión. Nuestro mismo gobierno lo ha dicho y lo hemos visto nosotros con la escuela de mi hijo, porque están manteniendo su distancia, están usando las máscaras y se han podido tomar medidas preventivas. En octubre, su escuela me contactó y me dijo de que él era el único niño en grupo 3 que había calificado para regresar, y por tanto, pues no iban a haber otros estudiantes en la escuela, y por tanto no iban a tener a maestras en el salón de clases. Entonces lo único que me ofrecían era de que mi hijo iba a estar en su salón de clases sin otros estudiantes, sin su maestra, solamente con una persona monitoreando mientras él recibía sus clases en línea. Realmente esto es inaceptable para cualquier niño, pero es aún peor para niños con necesidades especiales. Así que no nos quedó de otra que seguir teniendo a nuestro hijo en casa, porque pues la opción que nos ofrecían realmente no era equitativa. También está el hecho de que muchos padres tienen miedo de que sus hijos regresen a la escuela, no solo por la cuestión de COVID, sino también por lo que nos han presentado de cómo será el regreso a clases, que realmente suena horrible, que es de que los niños no van a poder hablar con nadie, que los niños no van a poder tener receso, que los niños van a estar sentados con su computadora, usando su computadora. Pero mi hijo regresó esta semana a la escuela. Realmente las maestras de mi hijo están haciendo una labor fabulosa y él ha estado feliz cada día que ha estado ahí, trabajando, aprendiendo más en 4 días que lo que había aprendido en todo un mes en la casa. Así que también quiero yo que otros padres se den cuenta que los niños van a estar felices y sobre todo que van a poder estar saludables, tanto las maestras como los niños, porque las escuelas no son focos de transmisión. Así que si realmente quieren ofrecer equidad para los niños, las escuelas tienen que estar abiertas de lunes a viernes para todos los niños.
Faith is something that keeps me grounded at TJ. In my freshman and sophomore year, Eid took place during a busy week of tests. I remember going to my family friend's house and seeing the look on their 5-year-old's face when I said I couldn't play with them this Eid because I would have to study for finals that I would inevitably have to make up. It is disappointing that me and thousands of other Muslim students across the county can't celebrate Eid to their full extent, and instead having to worry about making up tests that they missed or missing out on other educational opportunities.
As a Hindu, one of the main religious events that I celebrate is Diwali. However, this is also an event celebrated by Jains and Sikhs. Typically, it is marked by spending time with your family and learning about your religious traditions. However, I haven't always gotten the opportunity to do so. In fact, one year, my sister and I have been decided to skip school so that we could spend her last Diwali before she went to college together. I had to choose between going to school and celebrating a religious event that is important to my identity as a Hindu South Asian American. It's a choice that I shouldn't have had to make, and that's why I encourage FCPS to include holidays for events like Diwali on the FCPS student calendar for next year.
Every year during the fall, my parents and I fight about how I have to choose between going to services or attending school. I get upset about this because I want to pray, but I will miss so much work at school, and I don't get the right accommodations from my school's administration. Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur are the most religious and important holidays of the Judean calendar. In simple terms, they are the Jewish New Year. This is my personal chance to start over and begin an exciting school year. By not incorporating these holidays into the calendar, you'll be suppressing teens like me.
Every Eid, Fairfax County's lack of recognition of Eid being a holiday has made me choose between stressfully missing schoolwork with no built-in make-up flexibility or compromising and missing essential traditions which make me feel excluded from my faith and my community. Either way, the school board must deem Eid a holiday so students can stay on track academically while maintaining their religious practices.
Being Jewish for me is a huge part of my life, and every year I'm forced to choose between struggling to catch up on work that I missed during the holidays or sacrificing my religious observances to keep up with schoolwork. It's a real struggle for me, and I'm sure my Muslim and Hindu classmates feel the same way, and we need a calendar that represents the religious diversity of FCPS accurately.
My family personally spends every Diwali usually sharing a meal together, inviting a few close family friends, and lighting a few firecrackers outside. I would say that it would be really appreciated if the school board does recognize that there's a large variety of holidays that the student body and our families celebrate, religious or not, and it would be important for the school board to recognize that.
FCPS is failing. It's failing staff, teachers, families, and students alike. We are all losing. It's time to act. Stop congratulating yourselves for managing to open schools 2 days a week for some students with some teachers in the classroom. This is not public education in America. In Fairfax County, kids can spend a day at the trampoline park, go swimming or bowling with friends, roam around a crowded shopping mall, and eat inside a restaurant. But they can't go to school. You won't allow them to go to school. Stop pointing fingers and take responsibility. This isn't the governor's fault. It's not the federal government's fault. It's not the CDC's fault. You kept our schools closed despite mounting evidence proving they could open safely. You kept our schools closed after prioritizing staff for vaccines. Other schools in America have been open full-time since August. They have the same federal government and guidance as us. You own this failure. Your constituents are furious. Property tax increase notifications were sent this week. 52 cents of every tax dollar goes to public schools. Yet even with its exorbitant budget, FCPS can't get kids in school. You've overworked your teachers this year, disappointed parents, and caused irreparable harm to children. Your ineptitude has damaged this county far worse than the threat of any virus. We've sacrificed our kids because adults don't feel safe. This is not public education in America. Open schools 5 days a week. Reduce the insane demands placed on FCPS staff by bowing out of the virtual education business. FCPS was never designed to be an online platform, and attempting to provide both virtual and in-person instruction will stretch our teachers, staff, and resources beyond their capacity. Fortunately, free and appropriate public virtual education already exists in Virginia. And frankly, it exists in a far superior form than what FCPS cobbled together. FCPS need not recreate a wheel that already exists. K-12 and Virtual Virginia are established and experienced platforms. FCPS needs to return to the areas in which it excels: in-person education, special education, advanced academics, and special programming. Focus on your strengths. Guarantee 5 days of in-person education in the fall. Allow virtual students to be educated by existing platforms. Require vaccinated staff to return to the building. Use your tax dollars wisely. Put kids first in Fairfax County.
FCPS School Board members. We at Open FCPS would like to understand why the school board and the administration is not evaluating 3 feet of social distancing guidelines that would allow schools to open for 5 days of in-person education immediately. All the guidance on 3 feet versus 6 feet clearly say maximum extent possible as a mitigation strategy. If you add in universal mask wearing and teacher vaccinations, it seems reasonable that 3 feet of social distancing should be used. This is also the recommendation by the Virginia Department of Education. Why hasn't the school board had any debate over 3 feet versus 6 feet and asked for a plan that accommodates 3 feet of social distancing? The science has changed since March 2020. Schools all over the country, private schools in Fairfax County, schools all over the world. The WHO guidance, World Health Organization, I don't know if you've looked at their school guidance, clearly says 3 feet. You're doing our children a disservice, you're penalizing them, and you're retaliating against parents by keeping 6 feet of social distance requirements against any scientific evidence. Maximum extent possible means maximum extent possible. If it's not possible to have 6 feet, 3 feet is adequate to ensure safe and open schools. Thank you.
Our final speaker, Zia Tompkins, is now ready to speak.
Hi, good evening. Can you hear me? I'm calling from Kuwait. There may be a delay here.
Yes, we can hear you.
Thanks for the opportunity to speak this evening. As usual, my comments aren't really for the board, but for the real bosses here, which are the unions, and most specifically Kimberly Adams of FEE in particular, so I hope she's listening. I'm far away right now. My family's far away, and I miss them like crazy. And I'm here in no small part because of the actions and decisions of this board and of you, Kim. Me and my wife, we are blessed to have an amazing first grader who is inquisitive, curious, and loves to learn. She has always loved school. So you can imagine our horror last spring when, after just 2 weeks of FCPS virtual learning, she comes to us crying and says that she hates school. Right then and there, my wife and I, we looked at each other and we told her that she's done. She doesn't have to log in again. And at that moment, We decided for our daughter that she would go to private school. And we were lucky. We were lucky because we decided early enough and that we were able to, in the end, send her. But we were not prepared for that decision. Like most people, we bought into FCPS. We paid way too much for a house that was too old and too small for a family of 5 because we believed in the amazing pyramid that we were moving into. We can't afford private school. We invested in attending FCPS. We trusted FCPS. FCPS knows this. The unions know this. And they use that fact against us, against all of us. Now, after being betrayed, our family is left holding the bag. And so here I am. Here I am, away from my family that I love, trying to make ends meet, to do what's best for my little girl. But in the end, we're the lucky ones. We had an opportunity to make things work. What about the families who couldn't make things work? What about the third of the kids in this county who have dropped out or have practically dropped out? You know, for a county and a union that sanctimoniously preaches equity and equality and all this other self-righteous virtue signaling, who are the demographics of the kids that are being hurt the most? Ask yourselves that. 9/11. Let me tell you a story. I had a boss once who eloquently spoke of the hidden costs of 9/11. In the years after that tragedy, the casualties weren't just the headline number of killed or injured. After multiple deployments, extended absences, the costs were also measured in the number of divorces, in the number of broken families, in kids missed sports games, in missed life events, in dreams that were deferred or ambitions that were never realized. That was also the true cost. Right now, the statistics and data are being suppressed. The number of student suicides, the drug addiction, the neglect, the developmental
The bell
loss.
has rung. I don't know if you could hear it there. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Mulberg. At this time, we're up to our agenda item 3.02, Student Representative Matters. I call on Mr. Anabudo.
Hi, Dr. Anderson. Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you, Nathan. How are you?
I'm good. I hope everyone is doing well. Good evening, everyone. Dr. Brabrand, school board members, leadership team. As always, it is an honor and a privilege to be able to speak before you all this evening. I want to focus the majority of my remarks in 2 buckets this evening, and the first is the calendar conversation. I first want to express my gratitude on behalf of, just express my gratitude just for the board's willingness and desire to kind of get another option from leadership. That's kind of where I was going with my Student Rep Matters last regular school board meeting. And I'm glad that that's where we're headed. I just want to emphasize that I think this is a blank slate. This opportunity, it's a new chance for us to come together and not only to recognize and kind of listen to the constituents in our community who are calling for a more inclusive calendar, but to also simultaneously adapt to the needs of this pandemic and the desire and the need for recovering learning loss as well. And it's a chance to do both. So I'm inspired by that. And I want to tell, the other day, someone came to me and questioned why this conversation was so important. They made a comment asking me why it mattered. And to me, as someone who was particularly affected, as someone who's Christian, not particularly affected by this particular issue, the answer was still simple to me. And I said it's central to the idea of my work as the student representative and our work as school board members and elected officials. How can we make the lives of the people in our community better? That's the central question we have to ask ourselves as elected officials, I feel. And I want to assure you this evening that the decision that gets made about the calendar has the power to make the lives of our students better. That is why this conversation is so important. Talking to a friend in preparation for this meeting, she's a Jewish student within our school system. And she told me a story a couple of years back about a teacher who we all loved. I'm not gonna name names. She was a great teacher who made a kind of joke when she overheard this student talking with her friends about what she was going to do between going to school and going to Temple. The teacher made a joke that oh, being in my class is a lot more fun than sitting in Temple all day, so you'll be fine. And it's not that comment was so offensive or such a big deal to the student, but to me it stood out because it begs the question: what message, what example do our current calendar practices send to young people across the county? What message are we sending about the need to be inclusive and the need to recognize diverse voices and opinions with our actions and our practices through our calendar practices? The same friend recounts numerous stories, and I see them every school year, about going to half days at school and then having their parents pick them up and speeding across town to get to Temple on time, or staying up late hours into the night so they can finish schoolwork and don't have to do makeup work so they can go to Temple the next day, or graduations being scheduled on Eid. It's a commonplace issue in our system to have to deal with a lot of these puzzle piece-like scenarios of all these different calendar issues. It's not the story's not unique to her. And as a student, I can tell you from lived experiences that sometimes school becomes so stressful that even missing a single day seems like a terrifying thought. That is true of me, of one person. I can tell you that, and that's the feedback I've gotten from all students. So that's a problem on its own. Many students even come to school sick. But the point I'm trying to make is that this situation we currently put students in our system in for some of their major religious observances isn't sustainable, and it's not right. We can do better as a system. We can recover learning loss and listen to the community. And I truly believe that we need to do both. Of course, I recognize that we can never recognize all of the religious holidays present within our diverse community. But that is also why our board must do the intentional work necessary to lower the temperature in our school system, in our school buildings, so that students can feel comfortable missing a day or two, so that we can institute policies like flex days to be even more inclusive and reach a more diverse population. But for now, I think what we need to do is clear. We need to catch up to neighboring school districts and pass a more inclusive calendar while also adapting to the need of this pandemic and recovering student learning loss. Where there's a will, there's a way, and there has to be a way to do both. By centering student voice and student experiences on this issue, I believe these next steps become abundantly clear. And this kind of brings me to the second thing that I want to talk about, and that is, centering student voice and student needs as we talk about the virtual learning environment and supports for students. I didn't know this, but coincidentally, we had a few seniors come to speak at the school board meeting tonight, and we had plenty of students talk about the hardships that virtual learning has brought on. And I can't pretend like I've been the staunchest advocate for in-person schooling, but I can tell you that student leaders like myself and Kimberly Boateng, as well as the SAC, have talked about the need for academic supports as well as grading supports need to be placed in the virtual learning environment, because for many people it's just patently harder to learn virtually. I mean, there's one aspect of it. It's extremely difficult, and there have been little to no progress being made on the front of supporting students and their needs virtually, because while I personally recognize the situation this school system is and why we are where we are, I also recognize how hard it's been on students. And there is that little bit of a disconnect. It's also disheartening, though, because we see the effects of it as a system. We see students coming before you today and talking about how hard it's been for them. And we're almost at a year since this whole thing went down, and we're almost entirely done with the school year now. Our third quarter is ending this month. And I can tell you that students, if you ask them what has changed, what supports have the system provided you, what it's been given to help you through this virtual learning environment, the most common answer you'll get is absolutely nothing. Nothing tangible has been produced. And that's tough. That's really hard as a student. It's one thing to have to learn virtually because of the pandemic. It's another thing for us to pretend like virtual learning is the same as in-person learning and then not take any more actions to help our students be successful. Nonetheless, students have been working diligently. They've been working really hard to try and be successful. And I won't be here beyond this year as I'm a senior, but we're having, leadership is considering supports that will mostly benefit our underclassmen grading wise. And I won't be here to see the effects of it, but I'm sure, and I know with great confidence, our school board will continue to take action to recover learning losses at all levels, but also to ensure that the success of our students in high school right now who have permanent grades and permanent transcripts in freshmen, sophomores, and juniors in the years beyond. I have no doubt that all of you will do that work and that it will be good work, and it will ensure that our FCPS can continue the legacy of being successful and being competitive in the admission process, in the post-secondary process beyond this pandemic. However, seniors in particular, who you got to hear from a couple this evening, don't have that time. They don't have the luxury of recovery learning loss or secondary, post-secondary opportunities. Third quarter is ending and graduation is looming. And it's been tough because, when I tell you that we haven't seen that tangible support, it's resulted in there's a student in our school system who has gained admission into MIT and Stanford and UC Berkeley, these, extremely selective schools. But I know now that they're at risk of failing multiple of their classes, and that is not an isolated incident. There are many cases of students who we have not provided supports to in this environment to be successful. And as a result, their futures are in jeopardy. That's not a critique of virtual learning or the capacity for young people to learn virtually. It's doable. It has been done. It will continue to be done after this pandemic. It's more of a critique of our system's not unwillingness to adapt and change the virtual environment to be one that's more sustainable and more productive and more efficient. If you speak to someone who teaches virtually before the pandemic, they'll tell you that it's not the same as teaching in person, yet we've tried to jam some of those same methods into the virtual learning environment. I heard it likened to jamming, one of those square pegs into a circle hole. And it causes this rift. And it's been very tough and it's been very difficult. So, that is the hard part. And as the finish line is racing toward us, and the SAC, after all the work and advocacy it's done with proposal after proposal and idea after idea, you've heard Kimberly speak at school board meetings, and I've voiced this concern more than a couple times now, and things are coming to an end. The SAC has worked with me, the SAC group for the community to know of 4 students at every high school. So we have consensus among this, have come up with a plan to specifically aid seniors across the finish line and essentially close the rolling grade book at the end of the third quarter to free up resources to support students who are struggling the most within our school system and allow seniors to kind of take advantage of those social emotional learning opportunities that we are creating for them as the school year ends. Because as we heard, the human connection piece is so important. And I know you guys know that. So I look forward to working and connecting with all of you guys as I work to bring this proposal forward and get it through and get it passed, because at the end of the day, it's a small but necessary step to aid our seniors amongst a lot of other steps that need to happen to aid all students this year and years to come in ensuring that they're successful in our system's ultimate goal of preparing students for future success beyond FCPS. That's always been our goal, and that remains our goal. And I look forward to working with you guys to ensure that this proposal gets through and ensuring that in my time as the student representative after I graduate, till July 1st, that we're coming up with creative ways to also ensure that our students stay competitive and stay in the game into the coming years. Because that's going to be the hard part of this whole pandemic, as school systems readjust and come up with new plans and seeing how things change. We're going to have to be ahead of the curve with that, and I look forward to working with you all on that front. So those are my 2 thoughts on, I guess, the main issues of the day. Those are the 2 things that you guys heard from the community. That's where I stand, and that's where the students are, as I told you. But this has been SAC approved and SAC worked on, and I hope that we'll continue to work together. And I'm thankful for all the work that you guys have done and will continue to do. And I appreciate the time. I appreciate your ears and listening to me. And it's nice to get to see some of you guys virtually again. So thank you.
Thank you, Nathan. Agenda item 3.03, the FY 2021 third quarter budget review. I call on Dr. Brabrand for the introduction.
Thank you, Chairman Anderson. I'm going to have our Assistant Superintendent for Financial Services, Lee Burton, go over the third quarter update. We really only have a few slight changes here for you at third quarter, but certainly want to bring them to you and to the public. And so, Ms. Burton, I know you have a very brief presentation, and then we'll take any comments. But a reminder to the board, we will have a work session for any debriefing of extensive review of these numbers. Again, not many changes, but a quick little presentation for you and the community tonight. Ms. Burton?
Thank you, Dr. Brabrand. Good evening, Chairman Anderson, school board members, and Dr. Brabrand. The third quarter review offers an opportunity to revise the fiscal 21 budget based on current year trends or new requirements that have become known since the mid-year budget review that was approved in December of 2020. The agenda item is organized with descriptions of the recommended changes, followed by updated fund statements. As Dr. Brabrand mentioned, we do have a work session on Tuesday, March 16th from 11 to 1 to discuss this further, with approval at the regular school board meeting on March 18th. The data in the report is as of the end of January. On page 1, for the school operating fund, there are 2 expenditure changes totaling $8.7 million. First, staffing reserve savings. The staffing season ended with a balance of 150.9 positions, resulting from lower enrollment than projected. The position savings are valued at $5.7 million. Savings from the staffing reserve are typically recognized at third quarter because any anticipated staffing needs from now until the end of the year would utilize substitutes, not additional positions. Secondly, healthcare savings are anticipated based on changes to plan participation that were revealed by open enrollment, resulting in a savings of $2.9 million, so that the total expenditure adjustments are $8.7 million. On page 2, our fiscal 22 revenue adjustments displayed. We are recommending that the funding available from unused staffing reserve and healthcare savings be allocated to provide an $8.7 million increase to the budgeted beginning balance for fiscal 22. This results in a budgeted beginning balance for fiscal 22 of $25.6 million. Page 3 provides a summary of total funds available and of the recommended allocation to the fiscal 22 beginning balance. After mid-year, the fiscal 2 beginning balance was $16.9 million, and allocating the $8.7 million savings will bring that total again to $25.6 million. Page 4 shows changes to all the other funds. There are no changes to the school construction fund. There are no changes to food and nutrition services. Adult and community ed, or the ACE fund, is also on page 4. The total fund is $8.6 million, and there is a slight increase of $0.2 million due to the AEFLA grant award on both revenue and expenditure side. The grants and self-supporting programs are also on page 4. New and revised grant awards result in a net increase of $500,000 to the grant subfund and an increase of 1 position. And the new and revised grant awards are listed in the chart provided. Also in the grants fund is the summer school subfund, and there are no changes there as well. Next is school insurance fund, which is essentially workers' compensation and risk management. There are no changes to the school insurance fund. On page 5 is the health and flexible benefits fund. The FY21 third quarter revenue of $457.4 million reflects an increase of $4.9 million as compared to the mid-year projections. Our rebates and subsidies are projected to be $9.1 million higher based on estimates provided by CVS, the pharmacy benefit manager. This increase is offset by decreases in employer and employee contributions that total $4.1 million due to changes in plan participation, again revealed by open enrollment. So expenditures of $456 reflect an increase of $2 million for anticipated payments to Inova for the COVID-19 vaccines for the entire workforce. As a result of these adjustments, the fiscal 21 ending balance for the Premium Stabilization Reserve, or fund balance, will increase to $103.1 million, or $2.9 million over the mid-year projection. On page 5 is also the ERFC fund. There are no changes to that fund. And there is also the OPEB Trust Fund. There are no changes there either. On page 6 are where the fund statements begin, and they reflect the changes that I've just shared with you from the narrative section of the third quarter report. On page 15 is the supplemental appropriation resolution, which recognizes the changes that were made at mid-year and the recommended changes at third quarter combined. On page 16 is the fiscal planning resolution, which shows transfers from the operating fund to other school board funds. And then the last page of the document provides summary information about the current year or fiscal 21's grants. Again, reminder that we have a work session scheduled for Tuesday, March 16th. So any detailed questions can be addressed then with action at the regular school board meeting on March 18th.
Thank you very much, Ms. Burden. At this time, we have a number of school board members who do have inquiries. We will start with Ms. Corbett-Sanders.
Yes, thank you. And thank you, Ms. Burden, for responding to my request for clarification earlier today on one of the line items. But I do have two questions. The first one is the healthcare cost or healthcare savings. And I'm wondering, given our budget proposal that we just adopted a couple of weeks ago, whether or not we will be realizing these savings that we saw in the third quarter into all of next year as well.
Yes, we will. We are expecting some savings in fiscal 22 as a result of the change in participation. But that's something that we're working on right now. But yes, we would expect changes to follow.
Thank you very much, Ms. Burden. That's very similar to what we've seen at the Board of Supervisors as well. And I'm hoping by next Tuesday you can give me a rough estimate of what we think those savings are. Additionally, the $2 million for vaccines, which is money well spent. It reflects the extremely high participation rate of the educators in Fairfax County and the great collaborative relationship with Inova here in Fairfax County. My question is, that $2 million, can we use ESSER funds or CARES Act funding to recover those costs?
We might be able to. That's something that we'd have to check on. I have not seen vaccines as listed as one of the allowable usage, but that is certainly something that is related to COVID, and we can check into that.
I would like to, if you could check into that, that would be greatly appreciated. I would be surprised if you can get that answer by next Tuesday, but any time that you get it would be greatly appreciated. Thank you, and I look forward to our conversation.
Thank you, Ms. Corbett-Sanders. Ms. McLaughlin.
Thank you. I know we will have an opportunity to speak at the next work session, but I also know with our 3-minute time rule, it doesn't usually give us a lot of time, so I'm going to take advantage of this evening. First, Dr. Brabrand, I don't know if it came back to the board yet, but you may recall I had asked at a prior work session that staff help us better understand what happened with our food and nutritional services account. And in particular, Ms. Burden had noted that both Loudoun and Prince William had maintained their reserves and didn't require a $10 million bailout like our grant fund did require. So if that has not been provided yet, I would like to make sure that we have that information posted with the other third quarter information that we'll be discussing that day, because I think it's important when we look at what $10 million would have done that came out of our operating funds, and where we are with the Board of Supervisors making note just earlier this week that they're looking at one-time bonuses for all county employees out of their third quarter savings. We would have had another $10 million coming out of our third quarter savings. So I think we need to look into what else, what ways we can make sure that our employees don't find themselves seeing county employees with a one-time bonus, and we weren't able to do that. And then I also noted that the county executive mentioned hazard pay is going to be given to those county employees that were considered doing hazard work, frontline work during COVID. And I would like to have your team also make sure and let us know where that stands. So I know this will be a third quarter review, and I apologize for not saying something earlier to our budget chair, Ms. Marin, but I did mean to ask, where are we on getting an update on our CARES fund? If I recall, we have about 82 million that's been coming to us, but I'd like to see it all in one place, where we stand on what's been allocated, what hasn't been allocated yet. And then finally, maybe to Ms. Corbett-Sanders' point again about the county executive saying that they made some changes into their high-cost healthcare plans. That is what also produced some savings in the county side of the budget. I think it would be really good that we make sure we cover that, all in the effort of helping our employees understand where we are fiscally. I know you and your team care deeply about every single person that works for this school system. And I think that it's important that as much information we bring to them so they can understand where we are and how that's going to affect the next fiscal year and their compensation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Chairman
Dr.
Anderson?
Brabrand, please go ahead.
Yeah, just briefly, yeah, the health plan, we did get some quarter savings, and as Ms. Corbett-Sanders said, for the work session, we can give you our best thinking about, as we bring our budget to you, of course, for May, that'll be one of the things. Can we really lower some of our expenses associated with health benefits? We're seeing the same movement that the county is, and we'll give you our best thinking in just another week or two, and of course, our final thinking in May. The CARES Act, that second ESSER 2, that plan doesn't have to be done until April, and we're not done yet. We're really trying to get the final results from the state, get those tables, their revenue tables. And we saw the county executive's plan as well. Just a week ago, we had our joint meeting, and we'll be bringing you an update about how we're handling the CARES dollars. And yes, the first question on the food and nutrition and the reserves, that is a budget question. We're working on it, and we'll be able to have a full discussion at the work session per your request. So thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Brabrand. Thank you, Ms. McLaughlin. At this time, I do not see any additional speakers. I do know that school board members may be reserving their questions for the work session, which will be happening on the 16th. So, Ms. Burden, thank you so much for your presentation, and we are looking forward to that conversation in the next couple of weeks.
Thank you.
Agenda item 4.02, policy 2202, eligibility for enrollment. I call on Ms. Dana Koufax for the motion.
Ms. Derenak Koufax is muted.
Oh, thank you. I did not even see her come up yet. And now I don't see her at all. Ms. Derenak Koufax, please turn on your microphone. Yep, she's on. We are not able to hear you. If you are in need of logging on, again, please go ahead and do that, and we will move to the next agenda item to allow you the opportunity to do so. Agenda item 4.03, solar panels contract. I call on Ms. Tolan for the motion.
Yes, good evening. I move that the board approve participation in the Fairfax County Solar Program and authorize the division superintendent and the assistant superintendent, Department of Facilities and Transportation Services, either of whom may act without the other, to take all action necessary and appropriate on behalf of the school board to negotiate, execute, and administer project contracts and such other related documentation, including associated leases and/or site licenses, with an authorized solar contractor as part of the solar program for the benefit of the school division.
Thank you. Is there a second? Mr. Frisch, thank you. Ms. Tolan, would you like to speak to your motion?
Yes, thank you. I would like to speak to this solar facilities contract. This program allows FCPS to purchase on-site renewable energy with little or no upfront operational costs. It also has the anticipated benefit of reducing FCPS's greenhouse gas emissions and electricity costs. Under the solar program, solar contractors will design, permit, install, and operate rooftop and/or canopy-mounted solar panels at our school facilities. They will sell the electricity generated by the solar panels to the participating county entity or FCPS for use at that facility. County entities and FCPS will purchase such electricity at a fixed rate and over a fixed term of 25 to 28 years. This is not only an environmentally friendly program, but will also help FCPS's help keep our utility costs low. As part of this, I also want to recognize our student group, Solar on the Schools, that have worked for years to encourage us to move in this direction. We heard eloquent appeals from many of them at a recent meeting. We owe them thanks for their work and for the fact that we are ready to sign contracts and move ahead on this exciting project. In addition, our staff is currently working with county staff to see how we can best meet our joint environmental task force goals that were submitted to us in October. Making these investments in renewable energy that require little upfront operational costs is one step to help us meet our energy carbon neutral goal. The board will be hearing much more about this and our other goals at the work session in May. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Tolan. Mr. Frisch, would you like to speak to your second?
Yes, thank you. I'm pleased to follow Ms. Tolan, who I've had the pleasure of serving on the Joint Environmental Task Force with since last year. First, I would like to thank the many students who pushed this school division and our county to treat this issue with this, of solar and renewable energy with the urgency that it deserves. The contract we are voting on this evening would not have been possible were it not for the persistence of students who joined together years ago and those who continue to speak up at our meetings pushing for solar on the schools. As Ms. Tolan said, this program enables Fairfax County Public Schools to purchase on-site renewable energy with little or no upfront or operational costs. It will allow solar contractors to design, permit, install, and operate rooftop and on canopy-mounted solar panels at our school facilities. This contract is a down payment on our school division's commitment to confront the climate crisis head-on. I look forward to working with my colleagues and our student advocates to continue making progress on this important issue. From electric buses and net zero schools to waste reduction and hands-on green learning opportunities, we have our work cut out for us, but I believe we are up for the challenge. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Frisch. Other speakers to this motion? Ms. Corbett-Sanders?
Yes, thank you. I actually have a question to the makers of the motion. Is this the follow-on to the initiative that was started a couple of years ago, where we put all of the buildings in Fairfax County public schools and all those in the county reserve to determine which buildings were most suitable for the rollout of solar on them?
I believe that question is best directed at staff. Mr. Plattenberg, would you be able to respond to that inquiry, please?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, absolutely. Ms. Corbett-Sanders is correct. It is a follow-on. This does position us well to go ahead and execute those initial agreements and contracts, but it is a part and parcel to that initial program that, as the agenda item articulates, has had some challenges, but this positions us to go, and I do appreciate the makers of the motion and the second and everybody's support and us moving forward in this important initiative.
Ms. Corbett-Sanders?
Yes, thank you so much, Mr. Plattenberg, because that's really good to know for this board and for the community to understand that this is an ongoing commitment by Fairfax County Public Schools and the Board of Supervisors to ensure that we move forward with more environmental initiatives, because when we do that, it is not only good for our financial well-being because of the savings that are realized, but it's also good for the overall environmental health of the community, and it will create great opportunities for learning for our students. And so I am very appreciative of the continued work of both Ms. Tolan and Mr. Frisch in this area, and look forward to us continuing to do more and more in the environmental area. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Corbett-Sanders. Ms. McLaughlin?
Yes, thank you. I'm very pleased to support this, but also appreciate that Ms. Corbett-Sanders was pointing out, as posted on today's agenda or tonight's agenda, that it was back in July of 2019 that the prior board did join in with the Board of Supervisors in recognizing through, as Mr. Frisch noted, really powerful community advocacy, and certainly our students played a very important voice and role in that. At the time, I noted that growing up in Northern California, people were putting solar panels on their roofs back in the 1970s. So it's a long time coming, but the fact that we know that tragically, as we continue to hear about climate change and what is happening in our nation and the globe, anything that the 10th largest school system can do in the United States to model and emulate our community values is really important. So my absolute appreciation to Ms. Tolan and Mr. Frisch. Those joint county committees are extra time, and while they're a labor of love, it still is time. So thank you for your voices to this, and very excited to see this next positive step.
Thank you, Ms. McLaughlin. Any other speakers to this motion? Seeing none, I will now call for the vote. All in favor of the motion that is before us? Mr. Frisch, Ms. Omeish, Ms. Corbett-Sanders, Ms. Eismoheiser, Ms. Cohen, Ms. Pekarsky, Ms. Marin, Ms. McLaughlin, Ms. Tolan, Ms. Dernak Koufax, Ms. Keys-Gamarra, and myself. That is unanimous. Motion passes. I will now try to call on Ms. Dernak Koufax for a motion on agenda item 4.2, Policy 2202.
Thank you, Ms. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Wonderful. Thank you, Madam Chair. I move that the school board review policy 2202, section 1.1, to consider a temporary exception pursuant to Virginia Code section 22.1 through 5A and 4 that will allow for families who are permanently relocating outside of Fairfax County to a state or jurisdiction that is near the Commonwealth of Virginia to request for their child to remain enrolled in their current school enrollment within FCPS, either virtually or in person, for the remainder of school year 2021.
Is there a second? Ms. Corbett-Sanders, thank you. Ms. Dernak Koufax, would you like to speak to your motion?
Yes, I will. As we all well know, the COVID-19 pandemic has resulted in a number of changes that have impacted both adults and children in multiple aspects of their lives. A change is challenging under any typical conditions and is even more challenging during this time as we continue to navigate this pandemic. While it is beyond our control to manage or limit some of the change that our students are facing, we want to provide them with the opportunity to have stability in their school life, even if the pandemic or other factors result in their relocating outside of Fairfax County to a neighboring state or the District of Columbia this year. As part of our caring culture, it is right to allow students whose families desire to complete the 2021 school year with the teachers and staff that have supported them academically and socially, and to continue to learn alongside their peers, be it virtually or in person, for whom they've developed relationships with. For these reasons, I support the recommended exception to policy 2202 tonight.
Thank you, Ms. Derenak Koufax. Ms. Corbett Sanders, would you like to speak to your second?
Yes, thank you, Chair Anderson. And I want to thank staff for bringing this very important initiative to our attention, because this truly is about a caring culture. It's also a recognition that in the time of COVID, our students are facing multiple challenges. And oftentimes those challenges are associated with housing insecurity, the loss of a job by a parent, or in the cases we heard earlier this evening, military transfers. And we know how difficult it is when a child moves from one location to another in traditional times for them to make connections and to develop a community of support. But it is much more difficult in this time of COVID. And so this is the caring culture, the right thing to do by ensuring that our students are able to maintain those relationships through the end of this school year. So once again, thank you so much to the maker of the motion. Thank you to staff for bringing this important issue to our attention.
Thank you. Ms. McLaughlin?
Just briefly, I do want to say, Dr. Braybrand, that I very much appreciate you and your staff bringing this to the board so that we can formally do this. How will we be really communicating this out? Because as we're well aware, there's not a lot of people who follow us on our board meetings on a weekly or nightly basis, but I see this as really significant information we want to make sure our families and principals have.
Yeah, we'll certainly communicate to our principals through our weekly briefings that we've been doing since COVID with them. And I'll work with our executive director about how we can let the community know. We've had a few families, maybe 10 to 15, who've come forward. In fact, I think it originally came forward by a board member who brought it to staff's attention. So thank you, Ms. Corbett Sanders, but actually the board helped alert us. We looked into the policy, we looked into the state code, and we've given maximum flexibility with the state code, but we do need the flexibility of this one time making an exception to this policy, and I do think it's the right thing. But we'll communicate with principals and to the community, and we'll keep you abreast of the total number of families. We don't think it will be a huge number, but for those families, this is a lifeline for the end of a school year unlike any other, and I think we need to provide that lifeline to them.
Yeah, I do know I brought a specific case to your team where we did talk about how we could let the children finish the end of the school year. And especially because of the virtual nature we have, it really does allow the students, as we just really heard heartbreakingly today, their need for those connections. And even if it's just virtual, for those kids to consistently be staying with that teacher and with their classmates till the end of the school year, this is just the right thing to do. And I certainly encourage you and your staff to let us know if there's other things in looking at this post-COVID going forward where we have flexibility. Children can't always help where their parents are going to have to relocate them, and any time that we can be as flexible as possible for their own continuity and connections, I hope we can find a way to do that. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. McLaughlin. Ms. Heismo-Heiser?
Thank you. I'll be brief. I support this, I think, for all the reasons my colleagues have shared. I just have one question, Dr. Braybrand. I'm assuming this doesn't include transportation.
No, it doesn't include transportation.
I just want to make that clear.
No, it doesn't include transportation.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Cohen.
I just want to say thank you. We've had so many families this year in the Springfield district who, particularly because of COVID, have wound up having to move to Grandma and Grandpa's house in particular, and some of our military folks who've had to deploy and had to rely on the resources of friends and family and neighbors. So this is huge. I appreciate that every time we've brought a case to you all, you've made it work and kept those kids where they wanted to be. but just codifying it is a big deal. So thanks for that work.
Thank you. Seeing that there are no other speakers, I will take a quick turn. I do remember bringing this issue to your attention, so I am more than satisfied and glad that this is worked out in this way. It is the right thing to do in this culture where it's tough enough on our families. They don't need to have this be added as an additional burden. Along those lines, I would be remiss if I didn't plug in for my next ask, which is for our families who are looking to return into the Fairfax fold, who may have yielded their seats in special programs like immersion programs, hard to get into places, and now they want to come back because they've had to go and engage in some other educational pursuits during this COVID year. I would like for similar flexibility to be provided to those families, and I will be giving you some specific information very, very soon. I am very glad to support this motion, and at this time I will call for the vote. All in favor of the motion that is placed before us on the screen? We have Mr. Frisch, Ms. Omesh, Ms. Corbett-Sanders, Ms. Sizemore-Heiser, Ms. Cohen, Ms. Pekarsky, Ms. Marin, Ms. McLaughlin, Ms. Dernak Kofax, Ms. Keys-Gamarra, Ms. Tolan, and myself. That is unanimous. Thank you. And now, agenda item 4.04, Stonecroft Transportation Center. I call on Ms. Keys-Gamarra.
Okay, I will try to turn my camera on, and I wanted to, for some reason it's going on and going off, so I apologize if it doesn't stay on. I wanted to pull this off of the, you want me to read this? I'm sorry.
Yes, please.
I moved the school board approved this adjustment to the boundary of the Stonecroft Transportation Center property and authorize the division superintendent or the assistant superintendent, Department of Facilities and Transportation Services, either of whom may act without the other, to take all action necessary and appropriate on behalf of the school board and in consultation with legal counsel for the school division to complete, execute, and deliver the boundary confirmation agreement to Fairfax County Water Authority.
Is there a second to that motion? Thank you, Ms. Pekarsky. Ms. Keys-Gamarra, would you like to speak to your motion?
I would, and I wanted to pull this from the consent agenda because I wanted to make sure that the community understood what we were talking about. This, and Mr. Plattenberg, I'll ask you to chime in just a few moments, because this is property on the edge of Westfield High School, I believe. I'm sorry, Stonecroft. Sorry, the middle school. And it's a significant piece of land. Mr. Plattenberg, can you tell us the size of this?
Mr. Plattenberg, you're recognized to speak.
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Ms. Keys-Gamarra. Yeah, this parcel is 2,600 square feet. It's and I do want to recognize Ms. Keys-Gamarra and also Ms. Pekarsky for contacting me about this agenda item, because it is, although it was a correction, a rectification, if you will, of an inaccurate boundary adjustment, the survey that was originally done on the parcel, and it's basically reverting the property back to its original owner. It was something that through Ms. Keys-Gamarra and Ms. Pekarsky efforts, and specifically Ms. Keys-Gamarra and her expertise from being a former planning commissioner, stating that in order to be truly transparent, we have to identify more than just the initial plat drawing that we provided. And through her efforts asking for the additional clarification, is able to be more transparent that the reality of this is just really reverting the water authority's property back to them. And also they're making improvements for the water shedding that comes off of the Stonecroft where our transportation buses are currently housed.
Mr. Plattenberg, you sent a lovely picture to me. Are we able to show that to the community of what the plans are for that property?
Yes, ma'am. And the compliments I was providing was that we, in fact, added those. Thank you so much to Bev Medea and also Eileen Molberg, the clerk of the school board, for their efforts to go ahead and make sure that those are attached to the agenda item. So for the public that would look at this agenda item on board docs, they can see all of the actual depictions that are provided. We provided the ones that they previously had submitted when they went through their conditions of getting approval from the county for their improvements that they're going to do on it. And also it showed the pictures that you're referring to.
Are those
Are we
photos,
able to show?
are those photos on board docs? Can our clerk confirm? They are, Ms. Keys-Gamarra.
Okay, I didn't know if we could show it during the meeting. That was my hope.
There it is.
That's the plat, but there's actually a picture of the planned facility for that corner.
I think
We
our
may not have
clerks are
that.
looking to see if they can access that on your
Okay.
behalf. Is that the picture to which you're referring?
No, it's an actual building rendering.
Why don't you go ahead and proceed with your next question while they do a little
Okay.
research?
Okay, well, the picture actually answers my questions. That's the reason I wanted to show it, because typically, I wanted the community to know that we had done our due diligence in asking what this would entail, what our students might be exposed to. Typically, we would ask questions like, would it block sight lines? Would it create an eyesore? Would it cause security concerns? And looking at the picture actually addressed those questions for me. And so I wanted to make sure that the community was aware of what that would entail. I don't believe, based on the photo that is available on Blackboard, that this is creating a nuisance or a situation that might be unsafe, or an attractive nuisance would be the concern for students. And so all of those questions were addressed when I looked at the photo.
Thank you very much, Ms. Keys-Gamarra. Ms. Pekarsky, would you like to speak to your second?
I'm okay.
Are there any other speakers to this motion? Seeing none, I will now call for the vote for the motion that is displayed on the screen. Displayed on the screen. All in favor? Mr. Frisch, Ms. Omesh, Ms. Corbett-Sanders, Ms. Sizemore-Heiser, Ms. Cohen, Ms. Pekarsky, Ms. Barron, Ms. McLaughlin, Ms. Tolan, Ms. Keys-Gamarra, Ms. Derenak-Kofax, and myself. That is unanimous. At this time, I will invite our Vice Chair to present the consent and new business items.
Thank you. Consent agenda. Our adopted rules of parliamentary procedure, Robert's rules, provide for a consent agenda listing several items for approval of the board by a single motion. Many items listed have gone through board review, and documentation has been provided to all board members and the public in advance. Items may be removed from the consent agenda at the request of any board member prior to the meeting. The consent agenda items are on the screen. Is there any objection to approving the consent agenda? Seeing and hearing no objection, the consent agenda is approved. New business. The following are new business agenda items. There will not be a vote on these items, but action is scheduled at a future meeting. The new business items are on the screen. I call on Ms. Keys-Gamarra for a motion.
Yes, I'm hoping that the motion can be displayed. Thank you.
It is.
The board directs, turn my computer on, I'm sorry. The board directs the superintendent to identify those days that could result in significant absenteeism and provide guidelines for the manner in which FCPS will designate impermissible activities on said days to prevent negative impact upon the academic, social, or emotional well-being of those students who engage in such observances.
Is there a second to this motion? Ms. Corbett-Sanders, thank you. Ms. Keys-Gamarra, would you like to speak to your motion?
Yes, Very much so. And the reason I wanted to bring this forward is I know that we have had extensive conversation regarding our calendar, and a number of people are very, very concerned. And I wanted to make sure that our board took this opportunity to express its interest in developing a calendar that is inclusive of all of our communities while we balance the academic, social, and emotional well-being needs of our students and the FCPS community. As it stands now, we have identified about 7 holidays, and I believe more research is necessary. The board has been advised with respect to legal boundaries, and we want to adjust our calendar. Ms. Omesh has asked for an additional opportunity to provide or include as many holidays as possible, and I certainly support that. I believe our colleagues are committed, that we have unanimous support for inclusivity and for respecting the rich diversity of the FCPS community. I am concerned that as we identify these holidays, that we will not be able to include all of them. And we also need to make sure that we have meaningful community input. That's important to me. So, as we move forward, the purpose of this is to make sure that the community understands a few things. As far as this is my position, this is by no way, in any way, trying to limit the number of holidays that can be included. As a matter of fact, I want the superintendent to have an opportunity to do more work to identify as appropriate, culturally or religious significant days. And I want to make sure we have clear guidelines. We have received concerns that there is not necessarily the level of consistency that we need. And I want to make sure that we do that. So to be clear, I expect this research to be ongoing, that we are continuously working to achieve the equity and the goals of One Fairfax, to support inclusion of all communities, and to consider potential impact, and to provide the research that supports that, what is being presented in the regulation. This should expand our work. It should make it very clear for our staff what is appropriate and what is not appropriate. And it should be a change to the culture that we have now. It should help us to move closer to a more acceptable, caring culture. And that is the reason that I am putting this motion forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Keys-Gamarra. Ms. Corbett-Sanders, would you like to speak to your second?
Yes, thank you. I actually think that there's a typo in here, or a mistaken word, which I would like to call attention to first. We already have guidelines. And we learned the other day that guidelines are not as enforceable, and so that language should be a regulation and not guidelines.
Yeah.
Pardon me?
You're correct. The goal is to provide a regulation.
Yes, so
That is correct.
If there's no objection from the whole, I would like to make sure that we replace the word guidelines with regulation here.
Since you're the secondary speaker, why don't you go ahead and complete your second to this motion, and then I will address the body.
Great, thank you. And the reason I wanted that correction and the reason that I seconded this motion is because this is a continuation of a robust discussion that we had just 2 days ago of the importance of having more than just guidelines, but that we actually have a clear and enforceable regulation, because we do want to ensure that we have a calendar that is inclusive and that we are not going to be able to address every single religious and cultural observance in our calendar, because there are, as I mentioned the other day, 565 different religious, or 565 houses of worship in Fairfax County. And they range from many that we've talked about, or many of the speakers that spoke today, as well as some others. And so it is important for us to be very intentful in our work and ensuring that we have an inclusive culture that respects the opportunity for our students to pursue their religious worship.
Thank you very much, Ms. Corbett-Sanders. Mr. Frisch?
Thank you. I appreciate Ms. Keys-Gamarra bringing this forward. We can't recognize every religious or cultural holiday, and I think this is a...
I'm so sorry, Mr. Frisch. May I take the liberty of pausing your time?
Sure.
I apologize. I want to be sure that the rest of the speakers are within what may be the new language, so I apologize for not taking care of that. Are there any objections from the body to substitute the word guidelines with regulation? There is an objection.
No, a clarifying question. May I ask that?
Yes, please, Ms. McLaughlin.
So as Ms. Corbett-Sanders noted, we have an existing regulation. We do have, I believe, existing regulation about the students who are having excused absences for religious observances. That exists already. So that's my concern is, are we communicating out that we didn't have one and now we're creating one, as opposed to, are we revising or improving upon the existing regulation? So that's the clarity I wanted.
Sure. Ms. Keys-Gamarra, if I may take the liberty to say that your intent is the latter, to improve upon and make more robust the existing regulation?
Correct.
Are you satisfied with that response, or do you think we need to?
No, I don't mean to be so verbose. I just think to enhance the existing regulation.
Okay,
would be
then
my
I will take
recommendation
that
to the,
as
to the
a
body.
proposal for the body to consider.
Correct.
In lieu of substituting provide regulations, it will say to enhance existing regulations. Are there objections to the change of that language, to the change to that language? Seeing none, I'm sorry, I lost the people on the screen. Are there any hands up from the people at home? No, seeing no objections from virtual, there is an objection from Ms. Corbett-Sanders.
Yes, Ms. Omesh just mentioned to me that we have a regulation on absences and allowable absences. What this is slightly different than an allowable absences, to actually be a regulation on the operating conditions associated with those allowable absences. So on days where there is likely to be a significant level of absenteeism, that there would be certain parameters that were put in place to ensure that our students who are observing are not going to be negatively impacted by not being in school.
So your position, Ms. Corbett-Sanders, this is not just an improvement on existing guidelines, or rather existing regulations, but rather to expand and construct new and specific regulations that are not yet codified.
Yes, ma'am. We heard from Mr. Smith the other day that what we had were regulations, or were guidelines, and this would be a detailed regulation that was enforceable.
Thank you. Having heard the discussion that just occurred, are there any objections to returning to the original language to provide guidelines, to provide regulations under to provide regulations that do not currently exist as defined by Ms. Corbett-Sanders just now?
Dr. Anderson, I don't believe my question was answered. And so either I'm going to have to object to the language, I just want it clarified. Dr. Brabrand indicated in our work session that we do have a regulation about absences for religious observances. Mr. Smith, can you clarify? We've got multiple board members now saying, do guidelines exist or regulations exist? Because my point is, why would we have two separate regulations related to one another? We would just enhance the existing regulation if there's anything that speaks to student absences and religious cultural observances.
Thank you. 1 second, please. I want to be sure that we have the question, and let's kind of go back a little bit and take a step. Dr. Brabrand and Mr. Smith, can you please speak to the existing regulations and be very clear in terms of what that entails? that will better guide us to determine what this language should be.
So, yes, good evening, everyone. Regulation 2234 currently outlines absenteeism for students, and within that, it allows for students to take an excused absence based on religious reasons, and it outlines a variety of reasons that students could have an excused absence. The guidelines that you're referring to are the guidance that we provide teachers quarterly through principals on activities and days that they should shy away from when planning activities within the curriculum. So this regulation would essentially codify that and create a regulation instead of just guidance that we provide principals and teachers.
So you are saying to us that this will be new language?
Yes, this would be new language in regulation form that would state by regulation certain activities would not be allowed on particular days.
Thank you. Having said that, the language that I believe is on the floor as per this motion is to provide or to create regulations for the manner in which. Ms. Keys-Gamarra, that is the language that I'm going to propose to the body for reflection, which is to create and or develop regulations for the manner in which FCPS will designate permissible activities. Are there objections to that language? Seeing none, Ms. Mulberg, will you please make the adjustments? Oh, I'm so sorry, I didn't see your hand. I apologize.
I was commenting on a typo, but I think it's good now, Chair. Sorry.
Okay. Let's go ahead and have another read at that motion as it currently stands, and then we will proceed with our third speaker, Mr. Frisch. Madam Clerk, will you please read that for us? Because I can't see it.
The board directs the superintendent to identify those days that could result in significant absenteeism and create regulations that do not currently exist for the manner in which FCPS will designate impermissible activities on said days to prevent negative impact upon the academic, social, or emotional well-being of those students who engage in such observances.
Thank you. Mr. Frisch, please resume your time. I apologize for the delay.
I appreciate it. Thank you. As I said, I appreciate Ms. Keys-Gamarra bringing this clarity-seeking motion forward. It will provide families with assurances that they will not be negatively impacted or penalized for not being in school because of religious or cultural observations. That said, I want to be clear about where I stand on the calendar question overall. I believe we must demonstrate our commitment to equity by closing schools on religious and cultural holidays that are widely observed in the FCPS community. These closures would acknowledge the growing diversity of Fairfax County and reduce conflict and confusion around religious and cultural accommodations. In making these changes, our commitment to equity also requires that we mitigate any impact the resulting calendar has on the pay of our hardworking hourly support personnel like bus drivers, cafeteria workers, and custodians. At our work session recently, the school board asked the superintendent to develop a new calendar option that considers these and other issues, and I look forward to seeing that and deliberating it with my colleagues. As this conversation moves forward, I will continue to advocate for an approach that provides a more inclusive calendar for our community. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Frisch. Our next speaker is Ms. Cohen.
I actually had a question. When we received this language previously, there was another piece to it. And so I guess I'm a little confused because I felt like one relied heavily on the other. And it was directing the superintendent to provide additional information on absenteeism that arises from our students' participation in either religious or cultural observances during the school day. And then the subtext after that was that then we would direct to identify those days. My worry is that when we look at days that result in significant absenteeism, we know we have a lot of those that are completely unrelated to any kind of observance that's either cultural or religious. So I'm just not clear what we're guiding here. If the Monday after spring break is a big day that we don't see kids, are we then not going to have any kind of activities on those days? So just some clarification, I think, for me would be helpful.
Ms. Keys
Yes.
Gamara?
Sure, I'm happy to speak to that and happy to, as you know, this discussion occurred just a couple of days ago, Ms. Cohen, and you are correct. There was a first part, and perhaps we need to include, after identify, religious and culturally significant days that could result in significant absenteeism. The reason that the first part was removed was it was seen as simply asking for information. But you are correct. I should not have assumed in this motion that people knew what we were talking about. My purpose was to clarify. And so thank you for bringing that question forward, and I'm happy to make that adjustment in the language, if that addresses your concern. I think it needs to happen, even if you don't think it does, but I wanted to answer your question.
No, that's super helpful. I really appreciate that. Yeah, I think I was confused about one without the other, and I just want to make sure that that's specifically what we're addressing. So I would definitely appreciate that being added, and I do really appreciate the motion. Thank you for bringing it.
Thank you. Madam Chair, should I ask Ms. Moberg to?
Why don't you go ahead and share what the language is, and we will ask the body if there are any objections to the change at this time.
Identify religious and culturally significant days. And take out the word those. Yes, okay. And that's it.
Are there any objections to this current change? Seeing none, the motion before you is still up for debate. Our next speaker is Ms. Sizemore-Heiser.
No, Ms. Cohen addressed my concern, so thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other speakers to this motion as it currently stands? Ms. Omesh.
Yeah, thank you. I want to start off by, thanking Ms. Kizgamar for bringing this forward and acknowledging, of course, that in a pluralistic community, there are so many different groups that we may not even ever account for, and so this is important for that purpose. That being said, I want to make sure that as a board, we're not distracted from the important work of examining an inclusive calendar and being responsive to the community and what they've expressed, and really what the students more than anyone else captured today in the public comment. So I won't belabor that point, but whether it be this, whether it be the floating days situation that we talked about in the work session, I just want to make sure we're crystal clear about what we're actually accomplishing and what we're not. And this idea of blackout days will certainly be beneficial regardless, but I do look forward to seeing that option D calendar that is more intentional.
Thank you, Ms. Somesh. Ms. Marin.
Yes, I appreciate the motion being made. Thank you, Ms. Keys-Gamarra. I share some of Ms. Omesh's concerns. I do, however, think that for the purposes of putting this on the agenda for next week, I can support the motion, and then would like to see at that time, between now and then, what information our staff brings to us. And then I can decide for sure whether this is pertinent or if perhaps the solutions being offered already encompass this. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Pekarsky?
Thank you. I want to thank Ms. Keys-Gamarra for bringing this up tonight. And, being such a diverse school community, we know that there is absolutely no way we could honor every single religious holiday of our students by allowing a day off. It's just not simply realistic, at least in my own opinion. So I think this is extremely important to ensure that we are taking care of our kids and they do not have any negative academic impacts on the days that matter to them, and that they need to celebrate with their families, their cultural days of significance or religious days. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other speakers to this motion? Ms. McLaughlin.
Yes, I appreciate the clarity that's been brought to the language and the discussion among the board members. I do want to just make sure that everyone in the public who's watching either this evening or becomes aware of tonight's motion, that this is not signaling the board's decision or direction in any way about the pending calendar vote that will come up on March 18th, that we absolutely have had robust input from our community and really powerful speakers tonight as well. And so we want to make sure that everybody understands this is definitely just a way of expanding upon the board's robust discussion the other evening, that we are very mindful that we live in a richly diverse community. And I really think, Ms. Perkarski, you said it well, Mr. Frisch, you noted it, and others. We have so many faiths and cultural observances, and we really don't want any members of our community to face the pressure that we have heard from our community so far of what it feels like to have to make those difficult choices. And we don't have time this evening. We'll talk about it on the night of the vote, but I do want to tell you, my colleagues and Dr. Brabrand, I continue to hear some very sad, heartbreaking stories. And even if 99% of our school faculty get it right, the 1% where it happens and what people are telling us, what kids are being told and what's being said to them when they're needing to take these religious observances, it cuts deep, and the wounds are deep, and that's, I think, what we're really hearing on this conversation. So, Ms. Keys-Kamara, the bottom line is we know we've got to get better, and we've got to help our staff to understand. They can't possibly know and have a sense, and so with intentionality, this board and the superintendent being able to identify as much as we can. And finally, I will say what was also really powerful at the work session, this will be an iterative process. This isn't a one-shot deal. Our community will continue to grow in diversity and backgrounds and interests, and we're going to have to, as a school division, keep working with our community to make sure it's inclusive, especially when it relates to the calendar and students, their impact in attending school. So, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. McLaughlin. Are there any other speakers? Ms. Sizemore-Heiser.
Yeah, just briefly, I didn't speak much earlier because Ms. Cohen had addressed my concern, but I did want to say that when we're looking at inclusivity, when we're looking at all of our children being seen for who they are, and when we're looking at individual seeing versus group seeing, I think it's important to recognize that we have a long way to go in our county. And I think this is a good first step, but I'm not sure this is the only step we should consider. So I very much appreciate my colleague for bringing this very good first step towards inclusivity of our very diverse cultures that we have in our county. But there is a different level of being seen from this than from other steps. So I look forward to hopefully continuing this process. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Sizemore-Heiser. Mr. Anabudo?
Thank you. Dr. Anderson, I just wanted to briefly thank Ms. Keys-Kamara and Ms. Corbett-Sanders for this motion, specifically the language around regulation, because as we have briefly noted in the comment section before, students, there was that time period in my time in high school where we had the star days where, the guidance was that things weren't necessarily supposed to be done on specific days because we knew about holidays. And I appreciate the intentionality that we're taking to ensure that these are regulations that, like, as Ms. McLaughlin had pointed out, even if it's 99% done right, the 1% can have a profound impact on the well-being and the success of students within our school system. And I appreciate the intentionality that this motion brings forward. And I would also urge and caution the board to ensure that this is something that we follow up on and make sure we're publicizing and continuing to do the work on, because it is an issue. It is a big deal to a lot of students. And I see that daily, or yearly, I should say, as a student in our system. With these holidays and with these and with makeup work and with workloads and test taking, it's a real issue. So I appreciate the work that is being done on that front. And I would also just add that I also appreciate the comments around the fact that this is a step. This will be an iterative process, and there will be more steps that we need to take to ensure that we are being inclusive, and it doesn't also preclude us also recognizing well-observed holidays. So I think that there's a lot of good stuff in here, and I'm really appreciative to Ms. Keys-Kamara and Ms. Corbett-Sanders for it. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Anabudo. I see that there are no other speakers, so very briefly, I want to lend my support to this motion, and not to belabor the point, but I do want to echo some of the comments that were made by Ms. Pekarsky and Ms. McLaughlin. We do want to be sure that we provide opportunities for all of our students to be seen, and so I'm looking for something that can be wide-reaching, so that we don't unintentionally exclude the very populations we're trying to include. Having said that, I will now call for the vote. The motion is on the screen. All in favor? Mr. Frisch, Ms. Omeish, Ms. Corbett-Sanders, Ms. Eismo-Heiser, Ms. Cohen, Ms. Pekarsky, Ms. Marin, Ms. McLaughlin, Ms. Keys-Gamarra, Ms. Tolan, Ms. Dernock Koufax, and myself. That is unanimous. The motion passes. At this time, agenda item 7.01, Superintendent Matters. I call on Dr. Brabrand.
Thank you, Chairman Anderson. Just briefly, return to school continues. We welcome thousands and thousands of additional students back into schools this week. I got a chance to go to Rachel Carson Middle School on Tuesday. I saw a band class, an ESOL class, a middle school class, all in action. In band, I got to see some of the specialized equipment that FCPS has provided to help support critical instruction in our activities program. And our students are being given special covers for their wind instruments to be sure that they can be played safely in a classroom. And we're looking forward to welcoming another tranche of students next week, grades 1st and 2nd, and then the week after that, the remainder of our middle and high school students. So very excited about that. We're also very excited. This is Equity Month in March. In conjunction with the School Board, Virginia School Board Association, we're observing March as Equity and Education Month. This is an opportunity to deepen our commitment to creating a climate and curriculum where all students receive the resources they need to reach their fullest potential. We've had multiple conversations on that just this evening. And again, equity in education is a significant challenge. It wouldn't be being discussed if it were something that was not in front of us and many other school districts. We recognize more than ever that we have to be advocates and servants in public education to address these inequities head on. Our Equity and Cultural Responsiveness team has designed professional learning and provided customized support to schools and leaders, and we really appreciate all the work they have done. And our ECR specialists are part of a leadership team in each region, and they're working with our families to create inclusive school cultures. And we really need to do it by name and by need for our children, but we need to do it by school, by pyramid, by region as well as a system. We continue to be committed to elevating student voices. We have this year, done in the pandemic, we created high school student equity ambassador leaders. We call them SEALs, the SEAL team. And they're leading work at their schools and across the division to help dismantle the status quo and build equitable environments in their schools. So we're going to continue to work with them and all of our faculty and staff and community around raising equity and elevating it and putting it at the center of all that we do. A final comment with equity in mind. I know nationwide and even here in our region, we are seeing since the start of this pandemic, reports of violence and discrimination against Asian American and Pacific Islander students, families, and communities across the U.S. And frankly, the last few weeks we've seen that elevated here in our country. FCPS condemns all acts of violence, and we must acknowledge and address misinformation and xenophobic language that have led to aggression toward harassment and exclusion of our students and families from AAPI communities. It's our responsibility to ensure that people are treated with dignity and humanity in our schools. These behaviors are more than being unkind, and they will not be tolerated. Our success and well-being as a school division does rest on standing united against acts of violence from anyone in our community to our students and our staff, and hatred that is committed against any person or group. Please, I want to remind our staff and our community and our students, if you're a victim of harassment of any kind, please report it Students, report it to a responsible, a trusted adult that you have and reach out in our schools. You can let your parent know or caregiver or a trusted adult, but you can turn to a staff member and we will follow up. And again, I want to just say to all of you, I also recognize in the community that folks want to talk about, as exciting as it is to come back for a hybrid in 2 days, what about 5 days? We are committed, as I've said already over the last several months in town halls, to returning to full 5 days of in-person instruction. We're going to continue to do it in a responsible manner using the guidance of our federal, state, and local officials. We are committed to making that happen. And we're continuing, as we do the hybrid, to analyze our spacing. We have a wait list at some schools for people to come back in. At some schools, wow, there's not as many people in, and it really is varied by community. I mean, there are many stories going on right now how different communities across the country have responded differently even when they have been invited back in. So we know we still have a lot of work to do. The doors have just opened. We're going to observe our attendance, and we're going to continue to be nimble and react to evolving guidance and our work on the ground in schools. But I want to just thank our principals and staff. The last few weeks have been the result of months of planning, and they have gone as well as any of us could expect. And I appreciate the continued grace that our community and staff and students are giving one another during this pandemic. But we are at the beginning of the end, I believe, as if we continue to do our safety mitigation strategies in our schools and community. If we continue to get vaccinated, we are heading in the right direction toward the beginning of more and more normalcy, but we still have a ways to go. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Brabrand. Agenda item 8.01, board committee reports. I believe one board committee met in the past couple of weeks, so I will call on Ms. Keys-Gamarra for an audit committee update.
Thank you. I actually have 2 reports, but they will both be brief. Our Human Resources Advisory Committee met, and we discussed recruitment and hiring efforts. We had a presentation on that. We also reviewed employee engagement survey analysis and prepared subject matter for our upcoming report. The Auditor General audit meeting, we talked about the internal audit engagements and the status of internal inquiries. There's been quite a bit of work done that will be included in a report. And we also reviewed our risk assessment methodology. The next meeting will be on March 24th at 5:30 p.m. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Keys-Gamarra. I will now call on Ms. Pekarsky for a skipped committee report.
Yeah, thank you. Just very briefly, and I don't have my notes, but I'm sure Ms. McLaughlin will help me. The skipped executive committee did meet this past Wednesday. It was to have the opportunity to recap about the full skipped meeting that we had just had a few weeks ago, and you know, look at our former priorities and see if they still apply, if there were others that we needed to perhaps add. The discussion really centered around 4 areas of importance that the skipped executive committee believes are still very pertinent. The expansion of community schools, early childhood, I think the other was behavioral health, am I correct? Behavioral health, and a new one that arose from the interest of skipped committee members, but also the need that we are seeing, and that is to look at transitions and workforce training and opportunities, and how we can partner and provide even more robust opportunities for our youth. So we will be taking these. We will reconvene as a full skipped committee in a couple of weeks and get an update on where we are and what are the action items that we could start working on immediately with the two boards. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Corbett Sanders, did you have a question?
For the viewing public, I thought it was important for Ms. Pekarsky to spell out what skipped means because it captures the core essence of the work between the two boards in this area. Thank you.
Thank you.
Is that a pop quiz or something?
Oh, I'm sorry. It's the
Successful.
Don't fail it now. Please help her.
Yeah, help me. I don't remember all of them.
Successful Children and Youth Policy Team.
And I did not mean to put you on the spot.
I'm kidding. I'm kidding. I'm kidding.
Thank you very much, Ms. Corbett Sanders. Ms. Marion will also have an update regarding some joint work with the Board of Supervisors.
Yes, thank you. Just a quick update from the Budget Committee. It seems like we're always talking about budget. It's the biggest thing. We just want to thank our County Board of Supervisor partners for having a joint meeting this past week to talk about the development of the budget. Our advertised budget went over to their side of the house, and now they are working to see how they can meet the needs of our school system and the county. So the work will continue, and we will have a public hearing in May for the school board's budget, but I believe the County Board of Supervisors has one coming up sooner than that. And I know the supervisors are also hosting public budget meetings as well. So lots of information out there about our budget. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Marin. In record time, she was finished. Agenda item 9.01, Board Matters. I call on Ms. Cohen.
Yes, without objection, I would love for us to make a motion to move board matters to our next regularly scheduled board meeting.
Is that motion seconded? By Ms. Sizemore-Heiser. Would you please speak to your motion, Ms. Cohen?
No, thanks.
Ms. Sizemore-Heiser, would you like to speak to your second?
It would defeat the purpose. Thank you.
Any other speakers to this motion? Oh, thank you. Ms. McLaughlin.
Yeah, I'm disappointed. I mean, we started our meeting 3 hours ago. We don't have to go long. And this was the opening of schools. And we had an opportunity to, I think, bring some really good news to the public and to share with each other. So I don't support the motion, and I wish we would stop getting into this practice of doing it.
Are there any other speakers to this motion? Seeing none, I will call for the vote. All in favor of adjourning school board matters, please raise your hands at this time. We have Mr. Frisch, Ms. Omesh, Ms. Sizemore-Heiser, Ms. Cohen, Ms. Pekarsky, Ms. Marin, Ms. Derenak Koufax, Ms. Keys-Gamarra, Ms. Tolan, and myself. That is 10. All opposed? Ms. Corbett Sanders and Ms. McLaughlin. The motion carries. It is now 9:59. Our meeting is adjourned. Good night, all.